Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. It's going to be a great stream here. We got a lot of different things to talk about. Glad that you are all here tonight. Should be a great conversation. Happy February. Let's do it.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We've got a number of things to talk about here tonight. Very serious news out of the Middle East, etc. We're going to get to all of that. But if you want some context, one part of the story that is very important, it's just a quick announcement, is our book. Who are the Houthis and what are they fighting for? This is the recently published Center for Political Innovation book. Shout out to Elizabeth, who did the cover design. Absolutely beautiful cover design. Shout out to Marissa, who laid it out, did a beautiful job laying out all the great photos and pictures included in the book, a lot of graphics. And this book is making headlines. This book is raising eyebrows. This is now, and it has been since publication. It's been out for a week. It came out last Friday. Since publication, this book has been the top new release in War and Peace, and it is still number one in new release. After a week, it has remained number one. Secondly, it is the number one new release in the category of Yemen history. And I now find out that this book is the second top selling book on Yemen in all of Amazon. I am not kidding you. This book is the second top selling book on Yemen. There's only one book on Yemen that has sold more copies than this book, and it's only been out for a week. Look at the bestseller list. Go to the Amazon page right now. I will show you, and you go to the book for Who Are the Houthis, and they have categories, and you click on Yemen, and if you go to Yemen history, we're number one in new releases, and we are number two in bestsellers. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. We are number two on the bestseller list of books about Yemen. I mean, this is crazy. This book is on fire. This book is causing a stir. This book is changing the conversation about Yemen. There are 2 reviews of it up so far. I never expected such an amazing response to this book. I mean, we're at about 120 copies sold in just a week. More people are buying it every couple minutes. There's another one sold. This is changing the conversation. Right now, people are at the Jimmy Dore show in Milwaukee selling this book, distributing a printout section from this book as a leaflet to people. This book is creating a sensation. We are telling the American people why the Houthis are their friends and the Zionists are their enemies, why we should be supporting the picket line in the Red Sea. This is really something special. This book, I mean, it's not that long, and it'll give you in very, very clear language an understanding of who the Houthis are, what they stand for, a history of the movement, an understanding of why the Red Sea is happening. And this is really, really a breakthrough. This book is changing the conversation right now. I did not expect this response to the book. This is really changing the conversation. And if you've got a copy, please go drop a review on Amazon. Please tweet about this book. Please share it. This book is the best answer to the imperialist propaganda and the war drive. I mean, this shows people are hungry for this. People want some truth about Yemen. And the fact that there is no other book on this topic at this point, right? There's a couple professors who've written ebooks. There's some but this is the only book of its kind that in clear, basic language explains what the conflict is about and who the Houthis are. This is big. This is a huge accomplishment for the Center for Political Innovation. I did not expect that this was happening. I wrote this book because I had my life experience. I almost died in the Gulf of Aden, was part of a humanitarian mission. And I just mentioned that in the dedication. I don't even mention that in most of the book. In the book, I just mentioned the dedication, who it's dedicated to. This book, I didn't think we were going to make a lot of money off of it. I didn't think a lot of people would be buying it, but there's a hunger for it, and it's very reasonably priced, $10. They'll get it to you the next day. And yeah, this is a breakthrough, folks. So help us keep building momentum around this book, right? This book needs to be read by many, many people to know who the Houthis are, why they are right, why the Zionists and the U.S. imperialists are wrong, why the whole world is cheering for them. People don't know who the Houthis are. The USA is right now at war. It's declared them terrorists. It's bombing Yemen, and that people don't even know who they are. So read this book, share this book, help us build this book. We will build an anti-imperialist movement. So that's the first thing I wanted to get out there. Second thing that I wanted to get out there while we're at it here. Second thing is great announcement. So I told you all that we're having our national retreat coming up. Well, now we have the official invitation, right? Right? We now have the official invitation. Hold on. I'm having some trouble using this thing. I want to put the logo on the screen, and there's been a software update and it's being weird. Okay. Oh, I have to go to system preferences. This is weird. This is frustrating. All right. Okay. StreamYard is not working like it should, but that's okay. I have to grant access. This is so annoying. I did a Google update, and now here we are. Okay. Right. Don't you love technical difficulties? All righty. Okay. Well, it looks like I can't show it to you on the screen. Because I have to then quit Chrome and reopen it. And oh my goodness. But anyway, I'll just drop the link. We are having our national gathering for the Center for Political Innovation. Our national training school is happening. It's happening April 26th through April 29th. I'll put it in the link here, right? I was going to put the logo, the image on the screen, but StreamYard is not cooperating. But the national gathering is happening. Out of the movement to the masses. Our national gathering is happening in Vermont, and it's happening in April. And it's going to be really, really awesome. So sign up, right? If you'd like to go, there's a sign up form on the website you can link to. There's an announcement. I might as well just read you, the announcement for the retreat while we're getting going here. And then we'll get to the current news, but I'll just read it to you. All right. This is the announcement for our upcoming national gathering. So sign up. We need you to sign up, register so we know who's coming. Friends and allies, as U.S. society braces for an election year amid international turmoil and a decaying economy, many are looking not just for answers, but for what they can do to change the course of history. How can we get involved? How can we make things better? The synthetic left offers nothing but cancel culture, pessimism, and anti-human sentiments. Often this channels dissonance toward the right wing, which is wrapped up in the worship of markets and profits and has no real understanding of the global imperialist system or the history of struggles for justice. With our unique message of optimistic, constructive, patriotic socialism and anti-imperialism, the Center for Political Innovation and the City Building Tendency stand alone in offering an orientation that points toward a brighter future for working families and the people of the world. The City Building Tendency is a fresh outlook rooted in an understanding of Marxism, Leninism, the global anti-imperialist movement, and draws from many wells, including Christianity, American history, and so much more. While the Center for Political Innovation has blossomed around a unique pro-humanity, pro-growth message, we aim to take this message further, lower and deeper to the real masses, so the American working class can be awakened, brought to life by standing arm in arm with others in the struggle for justice. If you are a member of the Center for Political Innovation, a longtime friend or ally, or someone who is exploring these new ideas and concepts, we invite you to join us this spring. The Center for Political Innovation will host a 4-day national educational workshop at a beautiful facility in Vermont. The event will not only include political classes, but also group bonding activities, a talent show, music, arts and crafts, and other relaxing and stress-free activities. Attendees will get to know each other and share experiences and develop real bonds of comradeship. So, yeah, that's the event that we're having. It's going to be great. So sign up, register, and attend because we are building an organization. We are building an in real life organization. We're planning some great activities this summer. So get involved. We are not building a social media brand here. We're building a real organization. We're building a community of solidarity and resistance to imperialism. Sign up. We would love to have you involved. All right. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar the way these lives work, I give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are followed by the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if you have something you'd like me to talk about in the second half of our program, by all means, send me a super chat on YouTube, send me a Rumble rant on Rumble, send me a Rockfin tip on Rockfin, and I'll answer your question. That's the way this works. That's the way the cookie crumbles, etc. So think about what you want me to talk about in the second half of our show. Send me a super chat or a Rumble rant or Rockfin tip on that. Just get me talking in the second half of the program. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and we are going to jump right into it. Folks, as we speak, Syria and Iraq are facing a bombardment at the hands of the United States. 85 targets have been hit, and from what we understand, 125 different munitions or bombs, explosive munitions, have been unloaded. And the target of the U.S. attacks is, they're calling them Iranian-backed militias or Iranian-supported militias. That's the language that the USA is using. But that's not a fair assessment of what they are. They're making it sound like all these people are just soldiers getting orders from Iran. And that's bullshit. That's bullshit, right? I'm going to tell you who these people that are being attacked by the United States right now really are. So, Iraq. All right, Iraq was a secular Ba'athist government led by Saddam Hussein from the 1960s until the USA invaded Iraq and overthrew the Iraqi government in 2003. And at the time the USA invaded Iraq, the USA began actively trying to play Sunni Muslims against Shia Muslims. You have to remember that Iraq was a secular country. Saddam Hussein, Baathism recognizes Islam as having a special place in the Arab culture, but it's a secular government. You had Christians who had seats in the government, and the majority of Iraq are Shia, but there is a Sunni minority that is very large. But when the USA invaded Iraq, everyone's ID that the new government run by the United States gave them, everyone's ID had their religion on it. It said Sunni, it said Shia, it said Yazidi, it said Christian. And government jobs were suddenly started to be assigned on the basis of one's religion. Kurds, right? There's a lot of Kurds in Iraq. And government jobs were assigned on the basis of one's religion, right? The government had to have so many Sunnis, so many Shia. And then there was obviously a lot of Iraqis who didn't support the United States, were not sympathetic to the United States, but they didn't agree with each other. And many of the Sunni Iraqis who didn't support the United States, they formed militia groups. And many of the Shia militia groups that didn't support the United States, they formed militia groups. And Saudi Arabia, right? They have this ideology in Saudi Arabia called Wahhabism. And Wahhabism says that that Sunni Muslims are the only, that Shia Muslims are apostates, and that they're the enemy. It recognizes the Saudi king and the Saudi form of government as being legitimate because it's close to the caliphate and the style of government that existed in the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And you had Iran, which is a Shia government, giving support to the various Shia militias and Shias that were trying to stabilize the country. And you had various Shia clerics that were friendly to Iran. You had various Sunni clerics that were friendly to Saudi Arabia. You had different armed groups. You had Al-Qaeda forces moving into the country. You had nationalists and Baathists that wanted to, revive the old Saddam Hussein regime. You had many different forces that were fighting the United States. And the forces that were aligned with Saudi Arabia, the Wahhabis, they started targeting and murdering Shia Muslims because Shia Muslims are the majority in Iraq. They are the majority religion. And the main way the USA was able to prevent any national resistance from driving out the US invaders was to manipulate the Sunnis and the Shias against each other. And actually, William S. Lind, you should look into the name William S. Lind, because this guy was a Pentagon strategist who's actually a big Trump supporter now, William S. Lind. And William S. Lind, he was the Pentagon strategist, and he basically laid out the strategy through which the United States was able to, to carry out its operations and divide the Iraqi resistance. And he wrote a book explaining how to do it. And I have a copy of that book over there. It's on the shelf, so I'd have to go get up in order to get it. I'll go get it for you, actually, just because it's important. All right, so this book was written by William S. Lind, who's a military Pentagon strategist, explaining the strategy through which the USA began fighting against the Iraqi resistance. This is called the Fourth Generation Warfare Handbook by William S. Lind. William S. Lind, Lieutenant Gregory Thiel of the United States Marine Corps, right? And William S. Lind, this Pentagon strategist, in this book, he lays out the strategy for defeating an insurgency. And he talks about his whole theory of what he calls fourth generation warfare, arguing that in our modern times, wars between big countries are not safe because of nuclear weapons. The world would end. And so instead, wars are conducted via non-state actors, armed groups, in some cases not armed groups, but groups that act politically and can be useful by one great power in fighting another great power, non-state actors. And so he writes all about how, in Vietnam, the USA lost. The USA lost in Vietnam very, very badly. And he talks about that. And I mean, I'm reading to you from the Pentagon strategist who planned the US strategy in Iraq. Okay, I'm just going to read to you what he says because, I mean, he says it better than I could say it. All right. Okay. just going to find you a couple of these paragraphs. He lays it out how they were fighting. This is what he says. He says, the military historian Martin van Creveld compares state military that, with its vast superiority in lethality, continually turns firepower on a poorly equipped fourth-generation opponent to an adult who administers a prolonged, violent beating to a child in a public place. Regardless of how bad the child has been or how justified the beating may be, every observer sympathizes with the child. Soon, outsiders intervene and the adult is arrested. The power of mismatch is so great that the adult's action is judged criminal. This is what happens to state armed forces that attempt to split the difference between the Hama and the de-escalation models. The seemingly endless spectacle of weak opponents and inevitably local civilians being killed by the state military, overwhelmingly by the state military's overwhelming power, defeats the state on a moral level. That is why, for the rule of the Hama model, is that violence must be over fast. It must be ended quickly. Any attempt to compromise between two models results in a prolonged violence by the state's armed forces and the duration of the mismatch. In the 3,000 years that the story of David and Goliath has been told, how many listeners have identified with Goliath? And he goes on to describe how basically, if you're waging fourth generation warfare, when you're occupying a country, you can't just directly fight the insurgents. So what you do is you divide them and manipulate them against each other. And he spells it all out. This is an actual Pentagon text I'm reading you. What artillery and air power are in third generation war, cash is in the fourth generation. The infantry's most useful supporting arm. Local commanders must have a bottomless slush fund of cash to use at their discretion. Obviously, this cash cannot be subjected to the normal accounting procedures, as most will and necessarily properly be used for bribes. It is imperative that any regulations that present legal or bureaucratic obstacles to bribery are promptly changed. One of the mafia's successes is the concealed use of force. If an individual needs to be whacked, then it is usually done with very little fanfare and in the shadows. The rule is no fingerprints. Unless there is a specific message intended for a larger audience, people who are killed by the mafia are rarely found. This method requires patience. It often takes a long time for the right situation to present itself. If there's a message to be made to a larger audience, then a public display of violence can be used. The mafia also operates on the principle that everyone gets a cut. If you're willing to work for the mafia, you get a share of the profits. Money is a powerful motivator, especially in poorer parts of the world where fourth generation conflicts occur. Right? He says, in ordinary day-to-day actions, the golden rule is, don't do anything to someone else that if it were done to you would make you fight. If you find yourself wondering whether an action will lead local people to fight you, ask if someone did it to you, would you fight them? Right? This is, at the most powerful level of war, the moral level, the key to victory is to convince the local people to identify with the state, or at least acquiesce to it, rather than identifying with non-state entities. And he's going into detail about and the 4 steps of fourth generation warfare: dispersion, orientation, concentration, and action. Right? And manipulating fourth generation entities, non-state actors against each other. When some are arrested, give some special treatment, right? Spread suspicion against them. And that dividing the Iraqi people between the Sunnis and the Shias, between different militias and different factions, bribing some of the militias, giving them money to fight the other ones. This was how the USA was able to carry out its activities in Iraq. That's what the surge in Iraq really was. It was a surge of money. The United States basically went into Iraq and said, okay, because there's a lot of forces in Iraq that don't want the United States there, what we are going to do is we are going to give money to some forces. We are going to manipulate forces against each other. We're going to make it so confusing that it's not a straight up confrontation between us, the U.S. military that's occupying Iraq, and the population. We're going to make it a clusterfuck. And that's what they did. They made it a clusterfuck. And they confused the hell out of it. And one of the main things that they did, especially by the time Obama got into office, was that what they did was they started basically revving up the Sunni population against Shia Muslims. There's a very, very famous dome that is very sacred to Shia Muslims that was destroyed. It was bombed in Iraq, destroyed. A very, very sacred ancient dome that is very sacred to Shia Muslims. And many of these Wahhabi fighters were told that if they killed 7 Shia Muslims, they would go straight to heaven no matter what. They could sin for the rest of their lives. And they could go straight to heaven as long as they killed 7 Shia Muslims. And there was basically more or less a campaign against Shia Muslims. Well, Iran is Shia. Iraq is majority Shia. And it's right on Iran's border, right? Iraq is right on Iran's border. So Iran was forced to give material aid and support to a lot of different Shia Muslims to form armed self-defense organizations to protect their neighborhoods and their communities, and to form militias to defend their communities and defend their neighborhoods. And that's what they did. And all across Iraq, there are many different religious militias that are from neighborhoods where everyone's a Shia, and they are protecting their neighborhoods. And when ISIS showed up in Iraq, it was these forces that kicked ISIS's ass. And Qasem Soleimani was the tactician who gave them instruction and inspired them. A lot of them were very inspired by Hezbollah, the organization in Lebanon. And these forces were Shia Muslims defending their communities from ISIS and from Wahhabis, and trying to have peace with Sunni Muslims, right? The supreme leader of Iran, who many Shia look up to, he said that they want reconciliation, peace between different Muslims. There was billboard campaigns. There was an adorable billboard campaign that I saw, and it had, a father, and he's holding a sign that says, I'm Sunni. And the mother's holding a sign and she says, I'm Shia. And it's got the cute, adorable little girl, and she's holding a sign that says, I'm Sushi. It's very adorable, right? And the idea was, break down religious sectarianism. The supreme leader of Iran called for unity of all Muslims, an end to religious sectarianism. But the way the United States was dividing Iraq was in importing from Saudi Arabia Wahhabi fanatics, the kind of people who laid the basis for ISIS, importing, radical Sunnis who wanted to kill Shia into Iraq, and also dividing the Shia community, dividing the Sunnis, between Wahhabis and regular Sunnis, and covertly giving money and weapons to some militias, and helping target other ones, and making it all very confusing. That's the tactics of 4th generation warfare. And it was as a result of 4th generation warfare that ISIS emerged. And it was the Shia militias of Iraq that were backed by Iran that defeated ISIS. And in Syria, similar story. In Syria, you have the Syrian Arab Republic. The USA was trying to overthrow it. So what did they do? They worked with Saudi Arabia, and they worked with Turkey and Qatar, and they sent all kinds of Muslim extremists into Syria. And on the Turkish border with Syria, they had all kinds of training camps, and they had, the USA spent millions of dollars for training camps for the so-called moderate opposition of fanatics that were getting training and weapons. And they went over into Syria, and they were fighting against the government of Syria. Well, Syria is under threat, and, so Syria asked for Iran's help. So Iran, sent the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, and it sent different forces. Hezbollah of Lebanon sent soldiers, and some of these Iraqi groups came, and there were people in Shia neighborhoods and Shia communities in Syria who were recruited. And one way or another, a lot of different armed groups that were aligned with Iran and with the Syrian government went into Syria with the backing of the Syrian government to fight ISIS and help stabilize the country. So all over Iraq and all over Syria, you have these religious groups that are aligned with Iran and are community self-defense militias. They carry guns, they instruct religious and military training, and they have a wide variety of views. Some of them are very close to Iran's religious interpretation. Some of them are closer to the the Hezbollah view. Some of them are there's a wide variety. There's even communist militias. No one talks about this. They're very small, but in Syria and in Iraq, there are communist militias that are secular, right? In the areas where the communists have a stronghold, right? There are communist militias. And there's also, there's Kurdish militias. We know about that. The Kurdish, the Kurdistan, forces, and there's Kurdish militias. There's Christian militias. People don't talk about that either. But in Christian areas in Syria, there are Christian groups that wear crosses. There's all kinds of different armed factions, right? Non-state actors that have been backed and supported by Iran to fight against Wahhabism, to fight against those who want religious conflict and religious warfare. Okay. And, Hezbollah openly has Christian militias that work with it. There are communist factions that are aligned with the Houthis in Yemen, that are aligned with other, there's the Baath, the Syrian government is a secular Arab nationalist government. The Baathist Arab Socialist Party, one of the main parties that's in alliance with the Syrian Baath Party, is the Syrian Communist Party. And then there's the Syrian Communist Party, Bakdash, which is more of an anti-revisionist party. And then you also have, in addition to that, you have the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, which is a non-Marxist, but like socialist party. There are many different forces in the region that have their own armed militias that are sympathetic to Iran. Okay. And they are friendly to Iran because Iran doesn't want the countries on its border to be unstable. Let me pull up a map, right? Well, I can't because the StreamYard thing isn't working. But if you look at a map, right? Iran is surrounded by instability. On one side of Iran, you've got Afghanistan, and it was overthrown by the United States, and now there's drug gangs and instability there. Right. And then you've got Iraq, overthrown by the United States, Sunnis fighting Shias, chaos, instability. And then on the other side of it, right, you've got Syria, also big civil war. So on three different borders, Iran has instability and chaos and armed groups that want to kill Shia Muslims. And Iran is a Shia Muslim government. So Iran, in all of those countries, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in Syria, feels like it has to give military support to the people that are trying to hold the country together. And in Iraq, that means supporting Shia community militias. In Syria, that means supporting the Syrian government, which has invited Iran and its allies to Syria to protect them. In Afghanistan, that has actually, at times it meant even cooperating with the United States to try and stabilize Afghanistan. That's true. So it's complicated. But at the end of the day, it's not complicated, which is Iran is a huge country, a civilization that goes back thousands of years. It's got a revolutionary Shia Muslim government. And the USA has invaded 3 countries and created chaos in 3 countries on its border. And as a result of that, Iran has an obligation to try and stabilize 3 different countries that are right on its border. And that's what's happening. And in Syria and in Iraq and in Afghanistan, there are people who are sympathetic to Iran, who get support and weapons from Iran to try and stabilize and protect their communities. Okay. And anyone who wants to tell you this is Iranian aggression or Iranian, and I see this all the time, Iranian aggression, give me a break. Iranian imperialism, give me a break, right? This is a country that 3 countries on its border have been invaded. Imagine that the United States, Canada was invaded and cast into chaos. Mexico was invaded and cast into chaos. You got 3 countries that border them have been overthrown by the United States and cast into chaos. Under those circumstances, would any country not then try to move some forces into those countries to stabilize them and build relationships? The USA gives how much money to the Mexican police to fight the drug cartels. It's a matter of stabilizing and trying to stabilize things on their border. right? And the idea that this is Iranian aggression. No, Iran has been the victim of U.S. sanctions, regime change operations, and 3 countries, boom, 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 around them have been cast into chaos and instability by the United States, okay? So Iran, is in the center of 3 countries that have been cast into instability and chaos, and they're trying to stabilize those communities in those countries. Meanwhile, right, Syria, the USA tried to overthrow the Syrian government. There was a big civil war, but the Syrian government won. The Syrian government wasn't going to fall. Russia supported Syria. Iran supported Syria. And now Syria has been readmitted into the Arab League. Syria is at this point, it's over. The Syrian government won. So Syria is there, and they say, yes, Iran is our friend. Iran can have militias here. They can help us protect ourselves. Meanwhile, the United States has invaded Syrian territory. And in Syria, there are U.S. military bases. It's not like troops just cross the border. There are permanent U.S. military bases in Syria. And Donald Trump even blatantly said, we're going there to seize the oil, right? So basically they seized some oil wells and they're stealing Syria's natural resources. It's nothing but blatant highway robbery, okay? The USA violated Syria's territorial integrity, marched into Syria, found some oil wells, built huge military bases around those oil wells, and said, this is ours. So the United States is in Syria without the Syrian government's permission. And the Syrian government frequently gets up at the United Nations and says, USA is in our country without our permission. They violated our territorial integrity. We have been invaded by the United States. The USA just set up a military base in our country without asking us. And nothing happens, right? And the international community, the USA is not going to, is going to veto anything that the UN Security Council could do about it. And so there's just, there's a base there. And, the USA is in Syria without any support. Now, you keep all of this in mind. That what happened, right? We go back to 2020. What did the United States do? It murdered Qasem Soleimani, right? The Iranian leader who was in Iraq for a peace meeting, and they murdered him. He was on his way to the airport. He's going to the airport in his car, and the USA demolished his car with a drone. They airstruck his car and killed Qasem Soleimani, the national leader of Iran, the national hero of Iran. They murdered him. And then you have Israel carrying out targeted strikes in Syria against Iranian forces, bombing Iranian forces in Syria. And then you have Donald Trump, in addition to murdering Qasem Soleimani, carrying out airstrikes against Iranian-backed and Iranian-aligned militias, in Iraq. And then you have the Houthis, right? The poorest people in Yemen who are friendly to Iran. They admire the Islamic Republic of Iran. And now the USA is bombing them because they're stopping ships in the Red Sea. So all of Iran's allies are being killed. Iran's top commander, right? Qasem Soleimani was murdered by the United States. Iran entered a deal with the United States in exchange for giving up their entire nuclear energy program. The USA was supposed to lift all its sanctions on them, and it stayed intact for about a year, and then the USA ripped it up, right? So Iran basically gave up all of its nuclear power plants in a deal with the United States, and then the USA reneged on the deal, okay? So Iran is in this situation where it's like they're being attacked. Israel just murdered some of their top generals in Syria. And so Iran says, look, we got to do something about this. We got to retaliate. We got to show that there's consequences for this. So they've unloaded some missiles on American bases. And they haven't killed any Americans, it looks like, right? They weren't, they would blow up these bases, but Americans would know the strikes were coming, and they would destroy a lot of property, basically. They would destroy buildings, but they wouldn't kill anybody because they don't want to have World War III with the United States. But they have to show that they're capable of retaliating. They have to demonstrate that, that they can retaliate. So then Iran is going, and they carried out some strikes in Pakistan against Israeli, intelligence sites, and they kind of showed their might throughout the region, right? You've been murdering our forces, you've been attacking us, so we're going to retaliate. And in the process of doing that, 3 U.S. soldiers were accidentally killed in Jordan, and it was actually an accident. You know why? Because the USA can very easily shoot down drones, right? If a drone comes near a US base, it gets shot down, right? However, this base in Jordan, this is the story that I'm getting. This base in Jordan had so many American drones flying out of it that the American military at the base couldn't tell that this drone from Iran was not one of theirs. Okay, this base in Jordan has so many drones flying out, doing surveillance, doing airstrikes, and all of that, that Iran's drone flew to this base. And Iran is basically just sending this drone there to make a statement like, look, we have a killer drone too. We can send an attack drone someplace. And Iran is expecting that the United States, this drone will fly into the base, and that the United States will, boom, blow it out of the sky, and that'll be that. But the Americans were sending out so many drones, they got confused, and they thought it was one of theirs. The American government, they thought it was one of theirs, and so they didn't shoot it down. And so this drone came into the base, and the Americans didn't shoot it down. The Iranians were expecting that the Americans would shoot it down since they had the capability of doing it. They weren't aiming to kill any American troops, right? They're not stupid. They don't want World War III. They're just trying to show, if you would keep attacking us, we can attack you. A drone gets into a U.S. base in Jordan when the Iranians weren't even expecting that because the American military is incompetent. It gets into the American base, and 3 American soldiers die in Jordan, right? And so now Biden is up there saying, oh my God, I blame Iran for this. We got to strike back. Dude, let's do like a, if you want to play this game of like, oh, Iran attacked us, we got to attack back. USA murdered Qasem Soleimani. The USA has killed how many people in Iraq? How many people in Syria? How many people? The USA is now bombing Yemen. I mean, and you want to go, oh, Iran killed 3 of our soldiers. Dude, you killed millions of people in Iraq, at least hundreds of thousands. You've been waging a civil war in Syria. You occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. You occupied Afghanistan. And Iran wasn't even trying to kill these guys, right? They actually, they calculated that the USA would stop it, as it usually does. But somehow the narrative that Joe Biden is running with is that this is Iranian aggression. Iran provoked it. They killed 3 of our guys. You've killed thousands of their guys, and they haven't retaliated. They've shot rockets into your bases knowing they won't kill anybody. Dude, that is an absolutely absurd claim. The idea that the USA is responding to Iranian aggression. The USA is arming Israel as they're bombing Syria and killing Iranian-aligned forces all the time. The USA has killed loads of Iranian-aligned and sympathized forces in Iraq. The USA is bombing Yemen right now. The USA occupied Afghanistan and caused all kinds of instability in Afghanistan that spilled over into Iran for decades after decade, 20 years. So this narrative that somehow this conflict is Iran being aggressive and the USA responding to Iran, I mean, if you know anything about the region, anything, you would know that that's just not what's happening. What's happening is that the USA just seems to be determined. And it's not the USA, it's Israel, right? The Biden administration, to some degree or other, doesn't want to go full on into war with Iran, but it seems like Netanyahu does. And the Biden administration is kind of reluctantly going along with Netanyahu and setting up for an all-out war against the Islamic Republic of Iran. That's what this looks like, right? And Iran is trying not to fight the United States. They're doing everything they can to avoid fighting the United States. And the United States is trying its hardest to provoke a response from Iran in which they can say, all right, see, now we're the victims, and go into a full-fledged war with Iran. And that is very, very scary. And honestly, I'm worried about false flags. And I know that's something you're not supposed to say, right? That's supposed to be Alex Jones, conspiracy territory. Well, look up the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. The USA wanted an excuse to send its military to South Vietnam, so they faked an attack on an American ship. and it never happened. I mean, it was fake. They faked an attack on American ship, and they said, oh my God, our ship was attacked. And then they sent the forces in there. Read about the U.S. invasion of Panama, right? Again, what happened there, right? They said that the Panamanian soldiers fired on U.S. troops. But what actually happened? The U.S. troops charged the Panamanian border, right? Those Panamanian border guards are standing there with their guns, guarding the border. And a whole bunch of U.S. soldiers ran at them and charged at them. And they're like, oh my God. And they fired like a warning shot. And then they announced, and then George W. Bush got on TV, my fellow Americans, wouldn't be prudent to actually tell you the truth here tonight, but it appears that Panama, a drug dealing regime of Noriega in Panama, the drug dealers in Panama, they fired on American troops. It's a shame. It's a pity. We've got to go in and invade Panama and overthrow the government. Yes, we do. Wouldn't be prudent. Wouldn't be prudent. And he overthrew the government of Panama, and he went in and removed the government of Manuel Noriega on that basis. What the USA, it's this game they play where it's like they provoke enough of a confrontation from a country that then they can claim they're a victim somehow and attack. And this is like the Nazis used to always do this, right? I mean, Japan, when Japan invaded China, there was like a railroad that got blown up, right? There was like a railroad that was blown up. And they're like, oh my God, they attacked Japan. They blew up this railroad. We've been attacked. Well, it was bullshit. Japan just wanted to invade China, right? There's many, the Nazis, right? They had many. It's a game, okay? And the USA is just doing everything it can to provoke Iran into doing something or to have some kind of situation where they can say that Iran started it and then they want to have a war with Iran. And it's terrifying. It's very, very, very terrifying. Because a war with Iran, people don't seem to realize that's World War III. Iran is aligned with Russia and China. Iran is part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Iran has got Russian S-400 missiles, right? Iran and Russia and China and North Korea are allies at this point. And there's and the USA is always making a big deal out of this at the United Nations and making a scene about this. And Russia came forward and they said, you know what? If we want to do business with Iran, if we want to do business with North Korea, that's our fucking business and it's not your fucking business. Now, Maria Zakharova, she doesn't use, the four-letter words that I just used, but she's the spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry. And she basically just came out and said that. Look, Iran is our friend. North Korea is our friend. And so what? What is your problem? And that is one thing I do not understand. I don't, who are they talking to, right? Antony Blinken, John Kirby, U.S. representatives will get up there and they'll be like, this country we hate is trading with this other country we hate. And that's not okay. Why not? Why not? You hate both of them. So what? It's none of your fucking business. It's weird. It's like, the USA hates Russia. Okay. USA hates North Korea. The USA hates Venezuela, right? The USA hates Iran. But yet I endlessly hear American leaders get up and be like, Russia's buying stuff from Iran. They can't do that. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Right? If you were friends with Russia, you might be able to say something about that. If you were friends with Iran, you might be able to say something about that. But you're not. You've tried to lock both of those countries out of the global economy. You tried to crush them. And so they're like, oh, America won't trade with us. Oh, we can't do business with the SWIFT system and trade in American banks. Well, I guess we'll trade with each other. Hey, Iran, you got some missiles? Hey, and why are they shocked? That's what happens, right? It's ridiculous. It's almost like, I think there's like a vampire movie. I forget which one it is, where at the beginning of the movie, the vampire is like mighty and strong. And then at the end of the movie, he's dying, but he's using the same language and he's like trying to act like he's powerful, but everyone's looking down on him and he's not. It's like that. Okay. It's like the USA is like, it's got this memory, this distant memory of being, what it was in the 1990s or what it was in the 1950s. It's not that no more. So, at this point, the idea that, why in the world wouldn't Russia trade with North Korea? Why in the world wouldn't Russia trade with Iran? Why in the world wouldn't Venezuela and Iran trade with each other? It's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And so now there's these airstrikes going on, and Iran is going to have to retaliate somehow. And this all just leads to further escalation. And I am convinced that Netanyahu thinks this is the only way to save his political career. I actually hate to, to use this analogy, right? I hate to use this analogy, because it's not, it's not an analogy that, that is, I don't know how to put it. It's not an analogy that you don't want to understand politics in terms of personalities, right? I almost don't want to make this analysis, but it's starting to look like this. I think Netanyahu, his political career in Israel is over, right? I mean, he's fucked in Israeli politics. The October 7th thing is all he's got, right? And so October 7th happened. He jumped on that to start bombing Gaza. And he wants to keep that going as long as he can. And he's realized that the Gaza thing, I mean, he can just keep mercilessly bombing Gaza. The whole world's condemning him, but he just keeps doing it. But in order to get the Gaza thing to have more of a life, right, to keep going, he needs it to turn into a regional war with Iran. And that's what it looks like to me that Netanyahu is doing. Netanyahu went crazy against the Iran nuclear deal because he was afraid that it would end the racket in the Middle East of Iran is out to get us, right? He was very afraid that if the USA and Iran got to be friends, then it would be harder for him to tell everyone that Iran was out to get Israel, and that would end his political career. So he went crazy against the Iran nuclear deal. And he said things that were absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I covered that extensively. I went to Iran during those times. I was live on RT. I was the analyst. I didn't work for RT then. I was the analyst who analyzed the Iran nuclear deal, like as it was happening on international television. I followed the Iran nuclear deal very closely. And the Israelis would say things about the Iran nuclear deal that had absolutely no basis in fact, right? First of all, Iran has never been trying to get a nuclear weapon. There has been zero violations. Every nuclear site in Iran was monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. 24 hours a day, surveillance video, UN guys on the ground watching everything. Zero violations. Zero. So if Iran was trying to get a nuclear bomb, which they're not allowed to do under the nuclear treaty, you'd have one violation, 2 violations, 3 violations, 0. Right? South Korea was almost in full violation of the treaty, right? In the 80s, South Korea signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but they had a secret nuclear program and they got caught, and the USA did them a favor, and they didn't technically get found in violation of the treaty, but they were, right? Park Chung-hee and the South Korean military, they were trying to get nukes. Iran is not trying to get nukes. Their religion forbids nuclear weapons. The Ayatollah, the supreme leader, says that the Quran forbids nuclear proliferation. They're not trying to get nukes. But Israel has been playing up this idea that they're trying to get nuclear weapons. And they're not. And they've never been found doing anything that would suggest that. And some of the so-called evidence has been so embarrassingly bad. Like one of the examples that they found was, that there was a group of Iranian dissidents who came out and they had a picture of a safe. They said, this is the safe where the Iranians keep their nuclear secrets. And you know what it was? It was from a safe website that sells safes. They went to the website of a safe and they hit save. They hit F4 and they saved it was from a safe selling website. It was a picture they pulled off the internet, right? That's how bad the lies about Iran have been. They're just not trying to get a nuclear bomb. North Korea absolutely does have nuclear weapons. They quit the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But Iran is fully compliant with the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. They have never had a single violation of it. They just had nuclear power plants, right? And the USA has said they're not allowed to do that. Well, they are allowed to do that as long as the sites are monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And so then the USA did the Iran nuclear negotiations. And during the Iran nuclear negotiations, right, the USA actually, in the P5+1 nuclear conclusion, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the United States admitted in writing that Iran does have the right to peaceful nuclear energy under the treaty. And in exchange for that, Iran basically got rid of every nuclear power plant in Iran. There's like barely anything left. There's some. But in exchange for the USA admitting they had the right to do it and lifting sanctions, right, Iran got rid of all their nuclear power plants. So this idea that there's like a nuclear threat from Iran, there never was one. Now they don't even have nuclear power plants in Iran. Oh, and let me add, a number of nuclear scientists in Iran, civilians, have been murdered by Israel. Did you know that? I was in Iran and I visited their graves, right? These guys were college professors who taught physics, and they worked at nuclear power plants. They helped design nuclear power plants. And I visited the site. I visited the site in Iran where this college professor, civilian, man of peace, not a military guy, and he was walking to work one day, right? Outrageous, outrageous. He was walking to work one day, and out of the blue, somebody walked up to him and pumped him full of bullets, right? And there were 5 nuclear scientists, I believe, that were murdered, just murdered by Israel, right? It was absolutely crazy. That Israel, in coordination with the Mujahideen cult, which is a weird Islamo religious sect, Israel coordinated with them to murder 5 Iranian peaceful nuclear energy scientists. So there is no Iranian threat. And Iran, they had an election. They voted in a president, Rouhani, who said he wanted to negotiate with America. They made a deal with America. They basically shut down their entire nuclear energy program. And in exchange, what did the United States do? It put more sanctions on Iran. It murdered Qasem Soleimani. And now it's enabling Israel to keep murdering their people. I mean, this is absolutely outrageous. And also, let me add, and I mean, you want to look at this from another angle. And this is a really important thing to understand, right? Part of what Obama was doing while he was negotiating with Iran was that he was fomenting anti-Iranian sentiment among the Muslims of the world, right? Saudi Arabia was in an anti-Iran frenzy, was playing up the idea that Shias are apostates, Shias are not real Muslims. Iran is supposedly trying to take over the world. Turkey and Qatar and Al Jazeera was in an anti-Iran, anti-Shia Muslim frenzy. That's ancient history now. Now Iran and Saudi Arabia are good friends again, right? During Obama's presidency, Saudi Arabia executed the top Shia Muslim cleric in Saudi Arabia. And then the Iranian students went and burned the Saudi embassy. And the two countries didn't have diplomatic relations with each other. That's long gone. That Saudi embassy has been rebuilt. Iran and Saudi Arabia have good relations. There's now trains that go from Russia down to Iran over to Saudi Arabia. I am not kidding you. You can get on a train in Moscow that will take you south to Iran and then over west to Saudi Arabia, right? China sat Iran and Saudi Arabia down, and they reached an agreement. And that's why, at this point, the Houthi war is over, right? They haven't exactly reached a conclusion. They haven't signed an agreement, but they're not fighting each other no more in Yemen because Saudi Arabia has basically come to reconciliation with Iran and said that, okay, Iranian-aligned Houthis and our friends in Yemen, they can share the government together, right? And at this point, right, it's pretty clear that Iran is not hated in the way it was during the Obama administration. During the Obama administration, Iran was very isolated. In Syria, most of the Arab world was against the position of Iran, which is supporting the Syrian government. That's not the case anymore. The Houthis that are aligned with Iran, the Houthis that we wrote our book about, they are heroes to the entire Muslim world. And everyone knows they take leadership from Iran. They're surprised, they're admirers of the Iranian supreme leader. Okay. And at this point, Hezbollah, Houthis, they're all admired by the Muslims of the world. Iran is not isolated. So basically, if the USA and Israel attack Iran, the whole Muslim world is going to be on Iran's side. That's it. I mean, it's not strategic, right? It's like, it's not the moment where the USA would be able to win. The USA is more isolated in the Middle East region than it's ever been, right? During the Obama years, there was a wave of sympathy for Barack Obama. In this book, I compare Barack Obama to Napoleon, how Napoleon faked out the Muslim world, claimed to be a Muslim. Barack Obama ain't in office no more. All right. And I mean, it seems pretty clear that, at this point, right, that's Napoleon, right, who claimed to be a Muslim in his efforts to win over the Arab people. Barack Obama, Napoleon has left the building. Okay, folks, Napoleon has left the building. America is isolated. The whole Muslim world sees America backing Israel and protecting Israel and hates America. And the whole Muslim world hates Israel for what they're doing. And yeah, I mean, we're at the point where this is we're at the point where if Iran goes into a direct confrontation with America, all the Arab countries are going to be on Iran's side. All the Muslims of the world are going to be on Iran's side. Russia's going to be on Iran's side. China's going to be on Iran's side. I mean, this is not a win situation, right? And I mean, it sounds like the apocalypse because the USA has nuclear weapons. The USA's got troops all over that region. Look, we need de-escalation. That's what we need. Okay. We need de-escalation. Israel needs to stop bombing Gaza, right? That's the main thing that would bring everything to a de-escalation. If Israel would just declare a ceasefire in Gaza, just stop it, right? Israel's killed at least 25,000 civilians so far. Just stop. Just declare a ceasefire. And then the Houthis will stop stopping ships. And at that point, things will very rapidly de-escalate. Why is that such a hard thing to demand? Everyone in the world is calling for it. Members of Biden's own staff are calling for this. Members of Joe Biden's own staff are saying Israel needs to stop bombing Gaza. There's Israelis that are protesting and saying stop bombing Gaza, right? There was an event here in New York City, Rabbis for a Ceasefire. And a whole bunch of rabbis, pro-Israel rabbis were saying we need a ceasefire. All kinds of people who support Israel even are saying it's time for a ceasefire. Israel just needs to stop bombing Gaza. It's that simple. And the International Court of Justice has already ruled that. South Africa got a ruling. At this point, the International Court of Justice, the whole international community, people in Israel, people in Biden's own staff, people all over the world are saying Israel's just got to stop bombing Gaza, right? And that's it. And if Israel just stops bombing Gaza, the Houthis stop blocking ships, and things de-escalate throughout the region. But it looks like Israel's on the brink of invading Lebanon at this point. They're going to go into Lebanon because Hezbollah is aligned with Iran, and they're in Lebanon. Israel's looking like they're going to invade Lebanon. Well, they tried that in 2006, and they got their asses kicked in 2006. I don't know if you remember that. But in 2006, right as Bush was leaving office, they invaded Lebanon, right? And they got their asses kicked. And that was kind of that moment. I remember that was just as Bush was leaving office, just as Obama was coming in. That moment was a huge step forward for the global axis of resistance because Hezbollah kicked Israel's ass. The wild story, right? When Israel invaded Lebanon, I looked this up. It sounded too crazy and anti-Semitic to be true, but it happened. When Israel invaded Lebanon, because Lebanon is a very conservative society, because Shia Muslims are very conservative, women cover up, etc. Israel as a psyop. You can't make this up. It sounds too insane to be true, but Google it. It happened. Israel broadcast pornography on all the TV, right? You know how like in the movie when the bad guy, he like takes over the TV and he there's like a, static and then the bad guy says, all right, Superman will never get away with it this time. This is where I'm hiding Lois Lane or what, right? You know that it's in a movie, right? Where they, the broadcast on the TV, there's static and all of a sudden they're showing something else. Israel had the idea as a psyop because, Muslims are socially conservative, not a lot of porn in these societies. Israel thought the way they would win the war in Lebanon was they would hack all the TV stations and put porn on the TV. Seriously. So that's what they did. And they still got their asses kicked. Every neighborhood, every community, there's militias. They all have guns. They're on their rooftops. They got rocket launchers. And Israel went into Lebanon and Israel went out of Lebanon. It was the 13-day war, 13 days, 13-day war. And Israel got its ass handed to it. And then Lebanon rebuilt itself like in a matter of weeks. They just put everyone to work and they rebuilt it. And when they rebuilt Lebanon, they started building monuments. I remember this because this was a key moment in my political development because I was trying to figure out where I was. I'd been around a Maoist group and I was trying to figure out where I stood politically. And I remember this. It's a very important moment in my political development. I was a freshman in college. I was not, I was politically confused. But when they were rebuilding Lebanon, true story, when they were rebuilding Lebanon, they were building statues and monuments to Hugo Chavez in Venezuela and Che Guevara. That is a fact. And as they were rebuilding, as Hezbollah, Shia Muslims were rebuilding Lebanon, they were putting up statues of Che Guevara and Hugo Chavez. And they were announcing their support for 21st century socialism. And Hugo Chavez was on national television in Venezuela saying he supports Hezbollah and saying Hezbollah are socialists and revolutionaries. And I was like, whoa, something's happening. Something's happening here. Something was happening, right? And that was the last time Israel invaded Lebanon. And it looks like Israel's about to, invade Lebanon again. So, at this point, the forces in the Middle East that are aligned with Iran, they call themselves the Axis of Resistance. And that's in response. George W. Bush called Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, called them the Axis of Evil. And so the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon, his name is Hassan Nasrallah. He said, we're actually the axis of resistance. We're not the axis of evil. We're not the axis of evil. And I'm just telling you, things are changing. So there's some exciting things in the works. I want to be optimistic, but at the same time, I just like, in the face of the axis of resistance rising, in the face of countries around the world coming together to resist U.S. domination, in the face of all of that, we have a situation where the USA is acting as stupidly as it possibly can. Stupidly as it possibly can. That's what we're seeing on the part of America right now. And if there's any common sense anywhere in Washington, I don't expect the people in Washington, D.C. to not be Zionists and support Israel. I don't expect them to not hate Iran. But I'm just thinking from like a pragmatic point of view, right? Iran has been showing so much restraint. Iran tried so hard not to kill any Americans. That's the crazy thing. I did a video about how alarmed I was about U.S. troops coming home in body bags. And Iran is thinking, we don't want to do that. And they tried to not kill Americans. Do you realize that? The 3 Americans who died in Jordan, let me repeat, they died accidentally. Iran was going out of its way to not kill Americans. And the Americans didn't shoot the drone because they thought it was their own drone. And it ended up killing the Americans in Jordan. And Iran has tried to not kill any Americans because they don't want to provoke a war. But it seems like in Washington, D.C., they want to provoke a war. They want to provoke a war. So those are my opening remarks for tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I'm going to start doing the roll call here in a minute. I just want to repeat kind of what I've said last night. I'm not really comfortable saying these kind of things on here, but I just have to say them, which is that I'm in kind of a financial crisis at this point because I'm paying for a much larger apartment, right? I have to have this home studio. I can go into this room and broadcast. I have I have a TV screen that I use and big lights for RT and all of that. But I'm paying astronomical rent. You do not want to know what my rent is here in New York City for this apartment. It is insane. And so because of that, though, I do have this room that I can go into and stream anytime. All right. I can come in this room and I can stream for you all. And it's only February 2nd, and you're going to be getting a lot of me. But my request is that if you're liking what I do here, send a super chat, right? Send a super chat, buy a book, right? Sign up on Patreon. There's different ways to support me. But it's not simply a matter of getting me talking, which you do with the questions, which I'm going to answer. I got 8 super chats here to answer. I'm very excited. They're all going to be good super chats. But I'm asking you because things have been tight, and because I'm stressed about money, and because I'm worried about keeping this apartment, and I'm worried about a lot of different things and resolving the financial situation I'm in. There's a lot of other factors I can't get into, but because I'm paying astronomical rent for this apartment, I really could use your support. So if you send a super chat, you're not only giving me something to talk about, you're also helping support this work that I do. You're helping me keep this room to broadcast in. You're helping me pay my bills and not be stressed. So buy a book, send a super chat, support this channel, right? I hate to say that. I don't want this to turn into PBS where I'm stopping every few minutes to, try and tell you to donate so I can give you a tote bag. That's not what I'm doing here, right? Nobody likes to hear that stuff, but I do need your support because it's bad. It's bad right now, folks. There's no other way to say it. Inflation, other factors, it's bad. So I need your support. And also let me add that CPI funds are completely separate from my personal funds because there was some innuendo a long time ago, which was absurd. I've debunked, now at this point, I don't have any access to any CPI funds. So if you donate to CPI, that goes straight to bank accounts that I have nothing to do with, right? So please donate to CPI if you want to support CPI's activities. I have no access to those funds, right? I have nothing to do with CPI money, right? CPI money is all handled by other people now, which I thank those people. Thank you. You know who you are, and I thank you. But that was a stressful burden I don't want to handle. So if there's any concern about that, right? CPI funds are handled by other people. So if you want to just support CPI, donate to CPI. If you want to support me personally, buy my books, donate to this channel. All right, names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. We got Bob from Troy, New York. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got David in Germany, or David in Vietnam, Dino in Australia, AJ in New Jersey, Dusseldorf in Germany, Auckland, New Zealand, John McCarthy in Chicago, Emerson, Ontario, Ryan in Kansas City, Athens, Georgia, Patch in Arizona, Mohican, right? Nas from New Jersey. Welcome, Nas. Bendigo, Australia, David Fox. Chairman Meow in Connecticut. Meredith and Quinn in Washington. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Chris in Kansas City. Me in Washington State, says Philip Blair. Hiram in Utah Valley. Welcome, Hiram, right? Anthony from Detroit, Amsterdam, Holland. Welcome, Heidi from Amsterdam, Holland. Rice from Adelaide, Australia is with us tonight. Klaus Kinski in Germany is with us. Washington State, USA, Philip Blair. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I am calling you all out. Kinky from Joshua Tree. Welcome. Simon in Norway. Welcome. Chris and April in Salt Lake City. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hugh in England. Welcome, Hugh. Only Hugh can stop forest fires. Mosen from Denver. Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Pokemon, got to catch them all, right? Want to say your names. Pokemon, got to catch them all, right? I said the Smokey the Bear joke, which is probably way outdated. It was outdated when I was a kid. So then I did a more contemporary one, millennial one. I said, Pokemon, got to catch them all. Jeff in Minnesota. Killian in Milwaukee. Yeah, the folks out in Milwaukee did great stuff. I'm actually going to show you a picture from Milwaukee. A few pictures are coming through. I'm going to send them to my email. Oh, but I can't show pictures on here. Darn. I got to fix the program. So maybe I'll show them another night. I'm sorry. I can't show pictures on here. I was trying to show pictures before and it wasn't letting me. Never mind. I can't show pictures. But there was some great stuff in Milwaukee. The CPI team was out. They went to the Jimmy Dore show. They did great stuff. And so, shout out to all the CPI folks out in Milwaukee. Good crew of them went to the Jimmy Dore show. We're handing out leaflets to support the Houthis. Did great work. Shout out to all of you. You're all doing great stuff. Great stuff. Great stuff. All right. Pokemon go to the polls. Hillary Clinton. We do have members in Utah. We have members all over the United States. There are members in Utah. We don't have a local out there yet, but we have a local in the Pacific Northwest region. So Chicago folks stepped up. That's what I like to hear. Good work, Killian. All right. Okay. All right. So now I'm answering people's super chat questions. If you got a super chat question, you got something you want me to talk about, Rumble rant, Rockfin tip, send it on in. Send it on in. Number one, how would you define democracy? Number two, how is material wealth linked to the level of freedom? More wealth equals more freedom. All right. So democracy is an interesting word. It literally just means the rule of the people. However, the Greek origins of the word, it started in Greece. And the Greeks actually meant the word democracy in a negative way. Right? They meant it negatively. Right? In ancient Greece, there was a positive and a negative for every form of government. If it was a good absolute dictator, he was called a monarch. Monarchy was a good king. But a bad, corrupt, authoritarian king was called tyranny. So you had monarchy and tyranny. And then you had the rule of a small elite. And if it was a good elite, it was called an oligarchy. And if it was a bad elite, it was called a plutocracy. So you had oligarchy versus plutocracy. And then when you had elected government, you had the republic, which was a sensible elected government, and you had democracy. And democracy was vulgar mob rule. The Greeks thought democracy bad, republic good. However, the reason, and this is very important, right? This is something I wish many more people understood. Why does democracy exist? Or why does a republic exist? Why did they have a republic in Athens? Why did they have a republic in Rome? Because city-states were trying to build an empire. The Romans, they wanted to control the trade routes, and they wanted to bring in loot from all over the world. That's how the Roman Empire worked. They took slaves from different parts of the world. They took metals and crops from different parts of the world. The Roman Empire leached off the world, and it was a military city-state. Right? It was the Romans had a big, amazing army, and they could go around the world. No one could trade except through them. They were the global middleman in trade. All roads led back to Rome, and they were sucking in slaves and sucking in raw materials and crops and metal and minerals and stuff from all over the world. And the reason that Rome was a republic was because that motivated more people to get involved. That's actually, and that sounds crazy, but it wasn't about rule of the people and the consent of the governed. It wasn't about any of that. It was about the fact that if they had one king, right, that one king, he's going to use his position to take care of himself, to take care of his family and his network of supporters. And so the rest of the families in Rome wouldn't be as excited to go to war because they would say, hey, all the money is going to go to this guy. All the money is just going to go to the king and his inner circle. But by having a Senate where every wealthy landowning family, the Senate, right, those seats were hereditary, but it was all the wealthy landowning families, the old the old city, right? The new people that came in, they didn't have seats in the Senate. They had seats in the assembly. But the senators, the old ruling families, because they all had a seat in the Senate, they all wanted to be in on the looting and the robbing. And the reason that Athens was a democracy and the reason that Rome was a democracy was because it was a way of bringing people into the process and making them feel like they got a cut in the plundering and the looting. Right? And that's something that it's important to understand because people forget that. A lot of people have it in their mind that, oh, I'll be the leader. I will declare myself the leader and everyone will just follow me. No, they won't. Effective leadership means you involve people, because the more involved people are in running things, the more they feel like it belongs to them and the more dedicated they are to it. And so Rome was a republic because it brought various wealthy families from the Senate and various other people who got to vote in the National Assembly into the process of governing, so that they felt like they had a say in how the loot was divided up, and so they would be motivated to go out and fight the wars. That is why Rome was a republic. And the founding fathers knew this. And in fact, that was why originally only landowners could vote. Did you know this? Originally, only white male landowners could vote. And there was an argument. They said only people who are, quote, invested in the nation should be able to vote because they own the land, right? So it's like, they will get wealthier if the country's wealthier, right? There's private owners of individual land, but then you have the whole country. So those who own a chunk of the country, right, their money, their profit is at stake, so they should get a vote, right? And that was the argument, that only those who are, quote, invested in the nation should get to vote. Because the whole point of having a democracy was to make sure that the loot, the wealth of the nation, got handed out in a way that motivated everyone to be on the team. It wasn't about lofty ideals. It wasn't about freedom. It wasn't about liberty. It wasn't about any of that. The Roman Republic, the Athenian Republic, and the rise of suffrage in the West was originally motivated by this feeling that bringing everyone to the table motivates people to go fight. And that's that doesn't match what we've been taught about democracy, right? It just doesn't match that. But that is the reality. But democracy just means the rule of the people. And it's extremely hard to define. It is extremely hard to define because there are countries where people have lots of freedom, like the United States, where I would argue that we are very uninvolved in the process of governing. Right? I mean, right. Like, I could go to my city council meetings, I guess, get up and make public comments. But, I could never be elected for office, not here in New York City, right? A city council campaign in New York City, we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars, and that's city council, right? I vote. I could go vote, right? But I go vote once a year, once every 2 years, once every 4 years for president. But how involved are you or I in running the country? We have lots of freedom, though. And let's not deny that, right? I'm on here telling you how good the Houthis are when, our government says they're a terrorist organization. In other countries, you can't do that, right? In other countries, there's much more tight restrictions on freedom of speech. So we have a lot of freedom in the United States, but in terms of actually governing the country, we don't have that much input, right? In fact, the government is very much an oligarchy. It's a plutocracy, right? It's run by, there's a small network of very, very wealthy people who vet people from the population. They have this whole vetting process with their elite schools, and they find certain people who will do exactly what they say, and they put them in power. And our government doesn't give two shits what I think, right? The Democratic Party and the Republican Party in my neighborhood, in my community, I don't know who they are, right? I think there's probably a Democrat committee for my neighborhood. There's probably a Republican committee. And once a year, I might get something in the mail telling me I should vote for this guy or I should vote for that guy. But other than that, there's very little mobilization of the population. However, there are countries that have less civil liberties than the United States, where the population is very heavily involved in the process of governing. One of those countries is Cuba. One of those countries is North Korea. One of those countries is Nicaragua. One of those countries is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And these countries, they are not as free. I mean, Nicaragua is pretty free. You can say whatever you want in Nicaragua. Cuba, there's some restrictions on free speech. North Korea, definitely restrictions on free speech. Iran, somewhat. I mean, but these countries may not have the same level of civil liberties that the United States has, but the people are way more involved in the process of governing. The Islamic Republic of Iran would not be in power for a day if they didn't have a network of people in every neighborhood and every community who enforce their goals on a community level. The Basij, Basij, the Basij, that is something that the Islamic government relies on. They have people in every community and every level who every day are waking up and saying, how can I enforce the goals of the supreme leader? How can I enforce the goals of the revolution on a national level? And they call themselves the mobilized oppressed. That's what Basij means. And every day they wake up and their job basically, but they're volunteers. A lot of them don't get paid, but their job is to go around trying to carry out the goals of the revolution in a community level. In Cuba, they have these things called CDRs, Committees to Defend the Revolution, in every neighborhood. And there's people who wake up every day and say, all right, I'm walking around the neighborhood trying to make sure that what the Communist Party of Cuba wants done is getting done, trying to make sure that my community is doing everything they can to build communism, build socialism. Nicaragua, they have citizens' power councils. Venezuela, they have Bolivarian circles. In these countries that are under attack by the United States largely, that have popular governments that have come out of a revolution, the state is heavily reliant on a very heavily involved and mobilized population. That's more rule of the people than just being able to say what you want, right? I mean, freedom is one thing, right? But being actually involved in the process of government is something else. So I just wanted to throw that out there. As far as freedom being connected to economic development, I'll just say this. There was nobody in the world who talked about freedom of speech or freedom of assembly or freedom of conscience or freedom of religion, any of that stuff, until like the 1400s in Europe. Why? Why is that? Were people just evil until then? Were people just evil? And then one day, John Locke was born and people woke up and said, people ought to be able to say what they want. Of course not. Of course not. It's not that people were evil until then. The notion of civil liberties emerged when society had reached a certain level of development. And that level of development facilitated a level of freedom that didn't exist before. Try running medieval Europe, right? Imagine subsistence farming in medieval Europe. You're running a feudal commune where, the life expectancy is like 30 and people are growing crops and everyone's got to work their butt off to grow those crops. And if those, if you don't work your butt off to grow those crops, everyone's going to starve. I mean, try running a society like that where everyone can just do whatever they want and believe whatever they want. Do we think that people in the Middle Ages, look, in the Middle Ages of Europe, the Catholic Church was the state religion. If you said anything against it, you got burned at the stake. They used the death penalty very, very liberally. They hung people for all kinds of things, right? They used, it was a very, very authoritarian society. Why? Were people evil back then? People were just mean to each other back then. People just didn't want to be nice to each other back then. Of course not. They were at a very, very low level of development. And in order to keep society in order, they had to have a level of I don't know what you want to call it, authoritarianism. They had to have a level of, what do you want to call it? Cohesion in society. And in order to have it, they had to have a very, very authoritarian way of doing things. But with development came freedom. Okay. And nobody ever wants to talk about this. They want to make freedom. This is in the West. We are just pounded from the time we're in school up until every Joe Biden speech. Freedom is a moral thing. Freedom, good people believe in freedom. Good countries have freedom. Bad people want to take freedom away. Bad people don't believe in freedom. Bullshit. Bullshit. Freedom is tied into the economic foundations of society. As the economic base of society changes, the superstructure changes. So if you want freedom, the way to do that is to raise the level of productive forces. When people have wealth, when people have economic opportunity, when society is stable, when people have jobs and healthcare and education, there's more freedom. But when society is unstable, when people are hungry, when people are angry, when there's instability in society, that's where authoritarianism comes from. Franklin Roosevelt, the president of the United States, he knew this. He said, fascism is made from hungry stomachs. And he said to make sure something like World War II never happened again, it was necessary to eradicate poverty. As World War II was ending, before he died, Roosevelt said, to make sure nothing like Hitler ever happens again, we need to eradicate unemployment. We need to eradicate hunger, because hungry stomachs are what dictatorships and fascism are made of. And ultimately, the goal, according to Marxism, is to rationally organize the economy to the point that so much wealth can exist that no coercion exists at all. Right? The ultimate goal of communism is a world with so much wealth and so much abundance that there's no need for a state, that there's no real inequality. People just take what they need and do what they feel like doing, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. The road to total freedom is total development of the productive forces. So that's my speech on freedom. I have a lot to say on that, and these are not simple concepts, but they must be articulated. All right. A lot of super chats, and that's good. I got a lot to say. RFK made a convoluted tweet. He called for shutting down bases and withdrawing ground troops, but increased emphasis on protecting shipping lanes. Who is he trying to please? I guess I'll pull up the tweet, John, so I can see exactly what it says. I'll just click the link here. Who is he trying to please? I mean, it's just, who, right? I mean, it's like he's trying to please like 10 different people. I don't even know what to make of RFK at this point. When he was first saying all the pro-Israeli stuff, I thought, okay, all right, this is a guy who is good on a lot of issues, but he's got a thing up his butt about Israel. And I've met a lot of people like that over the years. There's some people that just, they're good on a lot of issues, but they have this emotional attachment to Israel. I thought, okay, he's one of those, fine. But when the bombing started, and he's not just pro-Israel. He's giving you the Netanyahu line. I'm like, this is despicable. This is absolutely despicable. Oh, this is like an article tweet. He says, this is an escalation that wouldn't have been necessary if we hadn't put our brave young service people in the crosshairs of these Shia militias that only exist as a legacy of our illegal war in Iraq. Well, that's what I said in my opening. True. Both Iraq and Syria have asked the U.S. to lose their territory. True. The Iraqi people voted unanimously for U.S. troops to leave, and they were only allowed to stay because Trump threatened sanctions. All true. In the same way, we would not tolerate Russian forces in Cuba, and Russia would not tolerate NATO forces in Ukraine. Iran doesn't tolerate U.S. forces on its border. True. Like, all of this is true. So we must welcome ground troops out of the Middle East and longstanding bases. We must focus instead on bolstering our Sunni allies in the region. That's not what our Sunni allies, right? So he's already trying to divide the Muslim world. That's like Obama language. And enforce shipping lanes, an extension of Fortress America. What the hell is he talking about? Fortress America. It sounds like Fortress Europe. That's like Nazi. I do not know what to make of RFK at this point, folks. I just don't know what to make of him. I mean, this is damn weird on many, many, many damn levels. I don't even know what to make of him. So I mean, that's a weird tweet, John. That is a weird tweet. Fortress America shipping lanes. Okay. All right. Do you think Trump would be different from Biden on the current Gaza situation? Let me think about that. I feel like in some ways, Biden being in office is probably necessary for this to be happening, but not in ways that are apparent, right? Because if October 7th had happened when Trump was president, you can imagine Trump would do the same thing and be a full, solid backer of Netanyahu. right? I mean, you can imagine that, but I feel like there's bigger issues at stake, right? Because we know that Donald Trump, he just wasn't excited about war. And many times he just said, look, if it's hurting my approval ratings, I don't want to be the guy to go to war. And there were many times where Donald Trump, he basically, he was basically complaining about how much they wanted to get him into war. He said he's bored about Venezuela. Biden, they can control. Now, he's an old man. He doesn't know what he's doing. Kamala Harris, they can control. She's deranged and insane. But Trump, they can't control so much. And Trump is just constantly thinking about polling data. Trump is just obsessed with how he's appearing in the media and how he's appearing on TV. And he's a selfish dude. It's not that he's a good man. I think Donald Trump is very much a narcissist. Donald Trump is very much an egotist and a self-centered person. But because of that, he doesn't play along with what the overall imperialist state and imperialist agenda is. He's trying to build his career as a populist. So I feel like there are factors of this that we are not aware of where Trump would be different. But on the surface level, you're asking if October 7th had happened, if Netanyahu did what he's doing now, would Donald Trump have, sure. But the other thing is you can't, and that's the thing, you got to be careful with any hypothetical like that. Because at the end of the day, Biden is in office for many different reasons, right? It's not like Biden just accidentally won. It's an accident of history, right? We know that the 2020 election with COVID, with the Black Lives Matter spring, with so many different factors and the media and everything, Biden winning, in order for Biden to not have won the 2020 election, so many things would have to be different. It's like the butterfly effect. Okay? Like the butterfly effect, right? It's a famous story, short story, but it's like there's many, many different factors that would have to be different for Biden to not be commander in chief. We'd be living in a totally different universe, right? You're talking about a completely alternate reality at that point. So in that alternate reality, would October 7th have even happened? We don't know, because so many different things would have had to be different. In order for Biden to have not won the 2020 election, like so much was going into making sure Biden won that election. The whole establishment practically circled their wagons to make sure Biden won that election. So if for that to have not happened, so many things would have to be different. There's no way to say. There's no way to say, Dan. I'm just being honest with you, right? I'm trying to look at this objectively, and I'm just telling you, you can't say, right? You can't say. All righty. All righty. All right. Just watched Resistance is Life, a beautiful documentary about Kobani and the Kurds in northern Syria from 2018. Have you seen it? I have not. I may have seen parts of it. Was that shown on RT? Because I did see a documentary about the Kurdish, like it's about the women's militia. Is that what it's about? The women's militia of the Kurds? Is that the film? I may have seen parts of it a long time ago. It's from 2018. And so that may have been, I feel like I saw parts of it a long time ago when it was on RT, but maybe I'm wrong. Was it on RT? Was it shown on RT? I may have seen parts of it. I'm careful with the Kurd stuff, right? I'll just be honest because, look, I'm not against Kurdish people. I'm not against them. If Kurdish people feel they ought to have a nationhood, who am I to tell a nationality they shouldn't have their own territory? But the reason that I don't get excited about the Kurds is because all of the bad people get excited about the Kurds, right? The U.S. government gave a huge amount of money and weapons to the Kurds. The CIA was sending people to go train the Kurds how to fight, right? And I was in utter shock at all these leftists who hate China, hate Russia, hate North Korea, are cheering for the fall of the Syrian government. And the only revolutionary movement in the world that they could possibly support was the one the CIA was also supporting. Right? And this happened. You can't deny this happened. That a lot of these DSA anarchist idiots, I don't know how they look themselves in the mirror, but they can't support every revolutionary movement that isn't supported by the CIA. Oh, they read something in the New York Times about how they violate human rights. They're no good. But the one supposedly Marxist or leftist force in the world, the Kurdish militias, that's being supported by the CIA, that's the one they can support. How do these people look themselves in the mirror and claim that they're revolutionaries? They're on, and when Donald Trump pulled support from the Kurds away, mainstream media lost their minds. Do you remember this? The mainstream media was more angry about it than anybody else. Most Americans don't know what a Kurd is. They've never heard of the Kurds. But like Joy Behar had a meltdown on The View about it. Oh my God, they cut money for the Kurds. This can't be. And I'm just like, and that was like one of Trump's greatest crimes against humanity was he didn't give money to the Kurds. He cut off funding for the Kurds. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, what the heck? I mean, so that's why no disrespect to any Kurdish person. But when I meet American leftists or I see Americans that get into this Kurd thing, I go, wait a second. Hold on. Hold up. And I will not get into that. I'll just tell you that much. That doesn't, but you got to be careful with all of this, right? Because things change. Fidel Castro got CIA backing at one point. That's a fact, right? When Fidel Castro was winning against the dictator Batista, the CIA gave him money. Does that make Fidel Castro a CIA agent his whole life? No, his views changed. He shifted, right? He shifted in an anti-imperialist direction. But in the early days of the Cuban Revolution. So who's to say that some Kurdish forces that were backed by America couldn't, get a foothold on something and then become anti-imperialist, right? Iran was supported by the United States at various points. The Iran-Contra affair, etc. Saddam Hussein definitely collaborated with U.S. imperialism against Iran. China was in a very pro-U.S. foreign policy during the 1970s and 80s. So, and there was a time, during the Khrushchev years, the Soviet Union was holding back world revolution. That kind of ended with Brezhnev. So countries that are aligned with the imperialists, revolutionary forces that align with the imperialists can change, right? And the role that a group is playing today is not always the role that it's playing tomorrow, right? I mean, at this point, the Maoists in the Philippines are basically CIA agents, right? They're just targeting Chinese forces. They're trying to destabilize the Philippines because they see it as too independent. They're basically agents of U.S. imperialism. They're playing their broadcasts on Radio Free Asia, from what I understand. The so-called Maoists, Jose Maria Sisson or whatever, they are just, and they might say they're Maoists and they might have People's War and all this, but they're basically agents of U.S. imperialism. And that's not a shocker to anybody. Right. Because that's just, that's the way that they have pivoted. That's based on the historical circumstances. That's the way that they've pivoted. And their allied activists in the West are part of that George Soros liberal NGO, LGBT woke apparatus. And so you shouldn't be shocked by this. But anyway. All right. Next question. All right. Noriega refused to allow Contra bases in Panama and started cracking down on drug money laundering through Panamanian banks. Yes. The Panama Deception is a film that actually won Best Documentary at the Oscars. And it has a number of people from the Workers' World Party in it. Ramsey Clark, who is working closely with the Workers' World Party, Gabrielle Gemma, Sarah Flounders. Interviews a lot of Workers' World Party members about why the Panama invasion was based on just utter lies. And Noriega was put in power by the United States. He was one of these military strongmen who was being used to fight communism. And then in order to be popular, he built airports and he started, providing services to people, and he pivoted in a more independent direction. And so the USA invaded Panama and removed him based on the claim that he was involved in the drug trade, as if the Contras were not involved in the drug trade, right? The USA was arming the Contras, had subjected Nicaragua to 10 years of civil war, arming drug dealers. And then they're like, oh, Panama, they're involved in the drug trade. And as John is saying, it looks like he was actually cracking down on the drug trade. But they said, oh, he's bringing drugs into this country. We got to stop him. And that's a new thing that Republicans are playing up. They want to invade Mexico because of the drugs, right? And they want to blame China, right? China is building, has facilities that make all kinds of different chemicals that are used in all kinds of different medicine, right? But some people get their hands on that medicine and mix it with other stuff and make it into fentanyl. So the Republicans have this idiotic talking point that somehow China is responsible for the fentanyl, which is ridiculous. China makes a lot of different synthetic chemicals. Drug dealers take those chemicals, mix them up into other things. China is not responsible for the fentanyl thing. That's just a lie, right? But it's like, oh, they're bringing drugs into our country. And the imperialists run the drug trade. The British Empire, they waged 2 opium wars, right? The CIA has been involved in cocaine in Colombia and in Nicaragua and in all kinds of places, right? The drug cartel thing in Mexico all comes from the CIA war against communism in Latin America. It's infuriating when they play that card. absolutely infuriating. And we got to watch out for this DeSantis Republican thing, right? There is a wing of the new Republican populism that is not good, that is very dangerous, right? The Nikki Haley, invade Mexico, blame China for drugs, Biden works for Iran, that wing of things. And, I'm starting to hear a lot of people that were in the Trump camp that said better things start to sound that way. Alex Jones talks that way all the time. He claims that Biden is somehow responsible for October 7th because they unfroze some of Iran's money in South Korea. I mean, there's a lot of these very, very idiotic neocon ideas suddenly finding their way into the Trump camp. And I think that's because they're anticipating possibly a victory for the Trump camp at some point. And so they want to control it. And I've noticed that the Trump camp has really, its rhetoric has shifted in a very bad direction the last couple months. And I think that's probably because they're expecting Trump to win the 2024 elections. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be otherwise, but I'm shocked about that too, because it seems like they circled their wagons. That's not going to happen. But it looks like a section of the establishment is saying we might get Trump in 2024. So let's make sure it's Trump that we like, because I have not, when Trump was president, he wasn't talking this bad. I mean, he kind of was, but I'm hearing really bad DeSantis stuff. People say Nikki Haley might be on the ticket. We're just going to have to see. But there you go. We did find out Kamala Harris is going to be the VP, right? That was leaked by, I don't know if you saw that. It was leaked by James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe revealed with an interview with a staffer, it will be Kamala Harris. She will be the nominee. They are not going to drop her from the ticket. And so we at CPI, we have been on top of who Kamala Harris is and all of that from the beginning. And so we are going to raise Kamala Harris at the Democratic National Convention. We have no choice. We know the truth about who that woman is, and she is satanic. Kamala Harris is satanic. I wrote a whole book about her. I did a lecture to her, an interview about her, and I'm going to have to write another book, and we are going to make opposing Kamala Harris the focus of our activities in Chicago, right? Because that woman must not be president. And if she becomes vice president again in 2024, there's about a 90% chance she will have her finger on the nuclear button at some point. And she is the most dangerous and the most easily manipulated and the most psychotic and vengeful person to ever get that close to the White House, right? And I've talked about this. She blames her father. She is estranged from her Marxist father. She blames her father for all of her family's troubles. She thinks that the world has treated her unfairly, and that gives her the right to take revenge. And she was ready to kill an innocent man, Kevin Cooper. She was ready to execute an innocent man, Kevin Cooper. She was ready to put a syringe in Kevin Cooper's arm and execute him. She tried to block DNA evidence, and she almost executed an innocent man. And then after that, she said she felt really bad about it. She felt really bad about it. Oh, she felt bad about it. She almost killed an innocent man. She basically committed attempted murder, perhaps not in legal terms, but in moral and ethical terms. She committed attempted murder, and she feels bad about it. So we're supposed to act like it didn't happen. She tried to block DNA evidence. She ran a drug lab that was giving false positives, and she covered up that result. As she was running the California State Attorney General's office, her office was constantly getting fined and called out by the courts for blatant dishonest behavior because she wanted to put as many people in jail as she possibly could. This is an evil person. This is an evil person. This is a dark-skinned woman, a black woman who they figured out was very useful in putting people who looked like her, men in particular, in jail because she has a crazy vendetta against her black father. Okay. And she wants to punish people, and she wants to hurt people, and she wants revenge. And so, she moved up the ranks as a prosecutor, trial lawyer, because she would just pull all the punches she possibly could to throw black men in jail. She put over 1,000 people in jail for smoking marijuana. And then when they asked her on the Breakfast Club, a national radio show that's nationally syndicated, if she'd ever smoked marijuana, she laughs about it. She laughed about it, right? She doesn't even think that somebody might notice that with her record as a prosecutor, that's like, it's not cool. She didn't even think about it. She does not have any moral or ethical compass at all, right? She can't do interviews, right? Like barely anyone has ever interviewed her, right? She said all kinds of things about Joe Biden, was basically calling him racist. And then Stephen Colbert asked her about it, and she practically had a meltdown on the air. It was a debate. She's doing this laugh that she's developed to cover up her rage. Whenever Kamala's mad, whenever Kamala is pissed off and wants to give you the death penalty, like she almost did to Kevin Cooper, when she wants to lop your head off, right? When it's, off with your head like the Queen of Hearts, right? When she's feeling like, I want to murder you, what she does is she starts laughing to cover it up, right? It's a Hillary Clinton trick. Hillary Clinton does it too, right? The aggressive, angry woman is doesn't play well in Peoria, as they say. Average Americans see that and they go, I don't want to vote for that. So whenever Kamala gets angry on TV, and she gets angry very easily, very shallow ego, she's very vengeful. She really wants to harm and punish people. Whenever she gets angry, she starts laughing. She has this maniacal, evil laugh that comes out whenever she's angry, right? Go and watch her interviews. Stephen Colbert is like the only person who ever asked a tough question to Kamala Harris on TV. Seriously, like no one asks her tough questions. And Stephen Colbert just said to Kamala Harris, he just said, hey, you said Joe Biden busing and all this. And she's like, it was a debate. Okay. It was a debate. It was like, I'm coming for you, Stephen. Oh, you're going to pay for that. I mean, I wouldn't want to be Stephen Colbert, asking her a tough question on national TV. Good night. Right. But anyway, I'm going to show you a clip about Kamala Harris. Right. And then I'll continue answering people's questions. Great stream tonight, right? We're talking about important stuff. Kamala Harris is the most dangerous potential president the United States has had in a long time. I cannot think of a candidate who is more dangerous in the history of America as dangerous as Kamala Harris is, right? And that may not be politically correct to say, that may not be what people want to hear, but it is the truth. It is the absolute truth. Kamala Harris is extremely dangerous, and we know this in CPI, and now other people are recognizing it. There's a new book about her called Amateur Hour. Doesn't emphasize the same things that we emphasize, but it recognizes the same thing that we recognize about her incompetence, her vengefulness. I mean, I learned some things from that book that are really wild, right? We are going to do everything we can to expose the truth about Kamala Harris. She is everything evil about the synthetic left rolled into one. Everything that the synthetic left has done that is dangerous, that's Kamala, right? I mean, the vengefulness, the cancel culture, the joy in harming people, the vengeful politics, the lack of serious socialism. Well, I'll show this clip later. I'll answer a couple more questions. I don't know why it's not coming up, but I'll show it later, but we'll be good. All right. Very good. All right. Number one, time tuning in. What's your take on Gaddafi trading weapons with European stay behind terrorists, Gladio? I don't look. In the 80s, there was a lot of weird stuff happening in Europe in the 70s and 80s. The CIA was arming all kinds of groups in Italy, right? And it was arming ultra-leftist communist groups that would do bombings and discredit communism to prevent the communists from winning in elections. It was also arming fascist groups. And, read about Operation Gladio, read about how in like 1979, was it 1980, 1979, the entire Italian government had to resign because they revealed that many of their members were part of something called the P2 Masonic Lodge. There was a lot of weird psyops going on, right? And the CIA was all over Europe dumping guns and weapons and stuff like that. So if Gaddafi was also doing that, it sounds, I don't know if that's true, right? And you have to remember, like the Lockerbie bombing, Gaddafi has never been proven to have anything to do with that, right? And they blamed that on Gaddafi. The Lockerbie bombing thing, that was bullshit. They tried to link Gaddafi to some bombings in Germany he was not responsible for, but is it possible that some Italian far right or far left groups got some guns from Gaddafi? Sure. Gaddafi gave guns to the IRA. Gaddafi gave guns to the African National Congress. He was a good friend of Nelson Mandela. So is it possible that some communist armed group in Italy in the 70s and 80s got guns from Gaddafi? Sure. And we know that all kinds of American guns were going to communists and anarchists and all kinds of other people. Again, it's what I was telling you about fourth generation warfare. They learned you don't make it capitalism versus communism. You make it a clusterfuck, right? And that's what they did in Italy. The years of lead, they made it a clusterfuck. That's how the imperialists run their operations, right? By making it a clusterfuck, they can win because the battle lines aren't clear, right? And that's what was going on in Italy during those years. So is it possible that Gaddafi was involved in there? Sure. I've heard it's not clear. I know that Bader Meinhof, which was this German left adventurous terrorist, group, Bader Meinhof, it appears they were getting some kind of support from East Germany, but they were also getting some kind of support from people within the East German state. But the East German state was also against them. And one of the Bader Meinhof guys is in prison and is now like a Holocaust denying white supremacist, apparently. And that whole story, like the more you look into the armed groups, let me just say this. I'm working on a textbook now. The left adventurous terrorist groups, that was something to stay away from. That was a scene to stay away from. The Weather Underground, they had this romantic appeal, right? But they, people think, oh my God, they're badass or whatever. No, they were, first of all, they were heavily infiltrated by the government. They were being used for all kinds of different ops and different purposes. And they also alienated a huge amount of the working class. And they were actively trying to demobilize class struggle. They didn't want people to mobilize the bulk of the working class, to go out of the movement to the masses. Their whole premise was average white Americans are the enemy. And that all the armed groups, for the most part, were pretty negative, right? All the groups in the West, there was not going to be an armed revolution in the Western countries. The bulk of the population was not interested in what they had to say. And all the groups in the Western countries that picked up guns and started doing stuff like that were not good. I'm just telling you. And a lot of them were heavily infiltrated by the government. All right. Have you heard the song Universal Soldier? I have. It's a very sad song. It's about, how wars are fought by people and yeah, I mean, it's a pacifist song from the 1960s. I've heard a couple different versions of it. It's soothing and it points to kind of the tragedy of war. Right. And yeah, I mean, I know the song. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those 1960s anti-war songs. It's more pacifist in its orientation, but it's sweet and it points to the sadness of war. So, yeah. All righty. A plethora of knowledge, legend status. Well, thank you. I'm glad you appreciate my knowledge. I'm glad you like what I do here. Solidarity from Australia. Well, thank you, David. I know there's a lot of people down under who watch this channel and love what we do. I want to thank you for your work. And David has been one of our most, consistent allies and supporters. And, David, you've been here from the beginning and you do great work out there and right back at you. We love you in CPI. So, you're a friend. And when you're here in the United States, let's get together. Let's not miss the opportunity to meet up when you're in this country. All righty. Very good. All right. Positives and negatives of a new Trump period as president. I'd take him as president. Again, the positivity of Trump is that he wouldn't be concerned with being a team player for the imperialists. He would be concerned about his own ego and his own agenda. And that might make him do things they don't like. That's my feeling. Look, at the end of the day, the problem isn't the president, right? The problem is U.S. imperialism. But Trump, they wouldn't be able to control him as much. And that's why he was kind of driven out of office. There was almost a coup against Trump or a color revolution. I mean, it looked like it. The 2020 election was not normal because they felt they couldn't control him and they felt that he was feeding certain trends that were leading toward, more instability in the United States and weakening the United States on the geopolitical stage. When the general stepped down, that letter that was written by the general who stepped down, they don't want him. Now, maybe they're getting to the point they feel like they can control him or something, or I don't know. And I'm seeing a lot of negative things from the Trump camp right now. But your average Trump supporter is way more anti-establishment, anti-war, open to critical ideas than your average Democrat, right? Your average Biden supporter is brain dead. Your average Biden supporter, if you say anything critical of mainstream media, they go, that's a conspiracy theory. You must be right wing. I'm telling, right? Biden supporters at this point are just ridiculous, right? Anything that is not just the establishment line, they have gotten to the point where They think that there are good people who follow Biden and follow the Democrats, and then there's bad people. And if you say something that goes against what they believe, they don't care if it's true or not. They've learned to think like, is that something that a bad person would say? Well, is it true? No, I don't care if it's true. I've heard that the bad people say things like that. And you're like, well, the Houthis are stopping ships because they want to, protect the people of Gaza. No, that's what like Russia says, and Russia's like bad people, and Trumpers like Russia, and it's like, but it's true, and they don't care if it's true, right? And that's Biden supporters. They are just shills for the establishment, and their response to anything that goes against the status quo is that sounds like it might be right wing, and they just shut their minds off. You can't talk to them. Far left people. It's interesting. Far left people are in a weird spot, right? The far left, it might be getting better. Right. And I mean, there's been so much damage done. Right. It's that whole thing about, we can be friends again, but I don't know. There's an old story. There's an old story about, right, that there's a fence. You ever hear this? And there's a fence. And an old man, there's a little boy, and an old man gives a little boy a nail and a hammer. And he says, go nail, some nails into the fence. And so the little boy goes out and he takes his hammer and his nails and he nails a bunch of nails into the fence. And then he says to the little boy, he says, all right, now go and pull the nails out of the fence. So the little boy goes out and he pulls the nails out of the fence. The old man says to the boy, he says, that is what it's like when you say something nasty or hateful to somebody. He says, you're sticking a nail in there. And he says, and you can apologize. And that's pulling the nail out, but there's still a hole that's left. Okay? And that's why social media is so dangerous, because social media brings out our differences. Somebody that you would never fight with in real life, your best bud in real life, you discover that you don't agree about something. And social media gets you guys, Facebook arguing or tweeting at each other. And you're going to pretty soon say some pretty mean things to that other person. The other person's going to say some pretty mean things to you. And you can apologize, but there's always going to be damage there. There's always going to be damage there. Right? And the far left, right? Some of these people that are now marching for Palestine, that are, God forbid, opposing Biden, calling him Genocide Joe. Oh, where have you been all this time? Waking up that, oh, wow, Russia and China are supporting the Houthis in Yemen. Oh, wow, Iran is supporting the Palestinians. Some of these people that have had their heads up their butt about Trump is racist and Russia is fascist and you're a Nazbol and all of this, some of those people are sounding better now. But there's still damage, because those people have been vile. And they have been vicious to anyone like Jimmy Dore. I mean, Force the Vote was actual violence and all of that. And it's going to be tough, because we're going to have to rise above. Look, if there starts to be some kind of reconciliation, which it looks like the alignment politically may shift to the point that there's some reconciliation, it's going to be very hard, because these people, they haven't just said, you know what, Caleb, you know what, CPI, you know what, Jimmy Dore, you know what, Chris Hedges, you know what, we just disagree with you. We may not agree with you, but, we know that you're good. No, it's, you're a Nazi, you're a white supremacist, you deserve to be murdered. They say that over and over and over again, right? It immediately goes to, you're a Nazi, you deserve to be murdered. Ben Norton cheered and celebrated the murder of Dari Dugina. So in order for there to be reconciliation, there's a lot of holes, right? So you can pull the nail out and start to reconcile, but there's a lot of damage. And that's why ultimately get off social media, right? I mean, I'm on here on YouTube telling you that. I've told you all, I dream of the day these broadcasts are only for people that are part of our community, and we're recruiting people not through social media, and that we're recruiting people in everyday life. And when they join the group, they get access and they can watch these streams and stuff. But I'm just telling you that social media is toxic, because it brings out people's differences. It destroys friendships. It destroys families. It puts dirty laundry out there. It's not good. It is not good. And so there may be some reconciliation but a lot of damage has been there. And a new Trump presidency, that's how we got on this. Again, he would be more independent. That's all I can really say at this point. As we get closer, maybe he'll start saying better things. But I mean, I'm seeing a lot of negative things in the Trump camp, but they don't want him because they can't control him as much. But we'll see. Is nihilism an effective tool of imperialism? 100%. If they can strip you of your passion, if they can strip you of your belief, if they can get you to think there is no hope and be cynical, they can pull your energy away and they can degrow you. And that's why they're pushing pot like crazy. And marijuana is legal everywhere because it gets people into this, whoa, man, let's just chill, That's why this, philosophical irrationalism, there is no truth. That's why Netflix has got endless cult documentaries. Don't join a cult. Cults are everywhere. Oh my God, if someone tries to get you to believe in something, it's probably a cult. That's what they're doing. They want you to be a nihilist, because if you're a nihilist, you will not go out and fight and make sacrifices. These guys are not nihilists, and that's why they're changing the world. These people are not nihilists. Read about the Houthis, learn about the Houthis. These are the poorest people in the world from one of the poorest countries in the world, and they are changing the course of human history. They have captured the whole global economy. They are changing the course of human history because they are not nihilists. They are people who will give everything they have and become martyrs for what is right. They are not nihilists. The Houthis are the definition of illiberalism. They're very religious. They're people of the land. And that's why they're changing history. Nihilism leads you to be deflated. And when you're deflated, you lose your spiritual power. And that's what they want. They want to deflate everything. They want to deflate everyone. Right? It used to be, at the beginning of the Cold War, they wanted it to be the good Americans versus the communists. And then they realized that it was much more effective to create this nihilism. And, people that are fanatical pro-imperialists can become fanatical anti-imperialists. But once you hit nihilism, you're gone. And they know that. And that's drugs promote nihilism, right? Depression is a result of nihilism, is often rooted in nihilism. You are 100% right, Killian. You are 100% right. All right. Can you talk about aleatory democracy, aka sortation? No, I don't know what that is. RW, I just don't know what that is. I mean, I'll Google it, right? You did send in a super chat, so I do owe it to you. So I'm going to Google it. What is sortation? Because I don't know what it is. Is that where sortition, the act of selecting or determining something by, it's like when you randomly pick people to be the leaders. Okay. All right. That's what that means. I've heard of that in ancient Greece, and that some of the Amish groups, they like randomly pick who the leader is, and he's the leader for a year, and then they pick another guy to be the leader for a few years, and it's called the bishop. And there's examples of that. I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, again, it's kind of a small community kind of thing, but we'll see. There we go. All righty. What are your thoughts on the DPRK's change in stance toward reunification? Well, Chris, North Korea is not offering them anything right now, right? They really opened up, right? Donald Trump went there and things were really moving ahead. And then the USA ended it. John Bolton ended it. There was an attack on the North Korean embassy in Spain. And then Biden came in, and now they're putting nukes. They're putting nukes, in the Korean Peninsula, nuclear submarines. And the Biden administration has basically wiped away and erased everything. Everything that was achieved during the Trump administration. And right now, North Korea can't look like, we just want to come back to the table. They have to make clear, no, you stabbed us in the back. And they look at what the Iran nuclear deal, what happened there. And they look at, how many times the USA has tried to reset things with Russia. And right now, North Korea, I don't blame them at all. for what they're saying. I don't think that it's not irreversible. I do think things could change, right? And my hope is that with a new administration and with changing conditions, if the war in Ukraine, there would be an armistice in Ukraine, if there was a ceasefire in Gaza, under new circumstances, under détente, if we could move toward détente, that could change. But right now, what they're saying, it makes absolute sense. What bothers me is that, North Korea, they are saying this. They are saying we don't want to reunify. They are tearing down monuments to reunification and stuff like that. But there are people that hate North Korea, that don't want reunification, that are just trying to scream this from the heavens. See, there's no hope. It will never happen. They're just blowing this out of proportion because they don't want it. Okay. So, that said, I would urge people to not give up hope. I am not giving up hope that there can be peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. But I mean, you can't deny that what North Korea is saying, which is under these circumstances, it ain't happening. Right. And that's basically what Kim Jong-un is saying. And he's going out of his way to just make that clear. I mean, the USA is basically threatening them, attacking them, doing everything it can. And so Kim Jong-un is like, all right, I am going to send a message that I am not giving you guys a penny. I am not giving you guys a finger. I am not doing nothing for you guys. Reunification monument torn down. South Korea, you're a different nationality. Fuck you. I mean, look, the USA has completely stabbed North Korea in the back, completely reversed everything that South Korea, has done. Right. And so as a result of that, they've got to move in this direction. My hope is that we could, at some point, my hope is that we could, possibly, at some point we could see this reversed, but it's going to take some work. It's a bad situation. I've been warning everyone how bad things are on the Korean Peninsula. They are worse than ever right now. And what Kim is saying right now is pretty solid confirmation of that. I am going to the World Youth Festival. Me and a couple other CPI people, we're guests of the World Youth Festival. The Kim Il-sung youth of North Korea are going to be at that festival. And honestly, I'm worried, to tell you the truth, because based on the circumstances, they would have every right to just completely ignore us, to just completely cold shoulder us. And if they did, there's nothing we can do about that. We are actually printing a special booklet dedicated to peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And I've reached out to friends, Reverend Milhan Stevens, Douglas Kim, the poker champion, of Korean heritage. He wrote an essay for it. He's great. I am Douglas Kim. He wrote this beautiful letter to the Kim Il-sung youth. And Reverend Milhan Stevens, who's definitely not a communist or a socialist, but it loves the Korean people, and his religion very much believes that Korea is sacred. And he wrote a beautiful essay, and Noah, our member from Boston, who is of Korean heritage, he wrote a beautiful piece about Korea. And I've got a couple pieces, and it's not a long book. It's very short. And we are printing copies of it. And it is our gesture of friendship to show the North Koreans who CPI are, that we're people that want to work for peaceful reunification of the peninsula. And we're Americans who respect you and respect your revolution and look up to Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un and stuff. But you know what? We may bring these books with us to the festival, and they may not take a single one of them, and they may just, nope, America, we're done talking to you. You guys are from America. Yeah, you might be communists. Yeah, whatever, go away. And if they do that, there's nothing we can do about that, right? I hope, because I went to the World Youth Festival. Again, I can't show pictures on the screen. I got to reboot Chrome, but I went to the World Youth Festival in 2013, and I had an amazing meeting with the Kim Il-sung youth. And I still have books that they gave me. The Kim Il-sung youth, they gave me books. I've got these books that they gave me, at the festival, right? They gave me this biography, the history of the revolutionary activities of President Kim Il-sung, and they gave me like a comic book I've got somewhere, like a children's book, and a novel. They gave me this, they gave me this novel, this novel they gave me. I got it from them, and I had an amazing meeting with the Kim Il-sung youth of People's Korea, right? And it was amazing. And it really made me feel empowered, and it really made me think that there was hope, and it showed me that how big of a deal it is when an American talks to a North Korean. We can't go there no more. It's illegal. Like, they will take your passport from you if you go to North Korea. So we're going to the World Youth Festival. The Kim Il-sung youth will be there, and I want to talk to them. But they very well may just blow us off. They may say, you know what, you're Americans, and, reunification is off the table, and see ya. We don't want to know you. We don't want to talk to you. And there's nothing we can do about it, right? There's nothing we can do about that. So I'm worried about it. But, that's why, let me just say this, okay? Look, there's people in the government who are probably watching this stream right now. I know the FBI and CIA monitor these streams, right? I've gotten harassment. I'm an RT reporter, and I know that people in the government, they think I'm garbage, right? I work for RT. I believe in communism. They think I'm awful. But there's got to be somebody somewhere in the government who thinks that having a war with North Korea is not a good idea. You know that? There's got to be somebody somewhere in the government who thinks that. I'm somewhere who thinks that, they've got nukes, we've got nukes. That could end pretty badly. One go boom, the other go boom, and there's got to be somebody in the American government who thinks that. Maybe that somebody in the American government could think for a minute and go, wow, the Center for Political Innovation, Caleb's organization, are going all the way to Russia to a world gathering of anti-imperialists with a special booklet that they composed dedicated to reaching out and showing that some Americans, maybe a small minority, but some Americans respect them. Some Americans don't think that they should judge North Korea based on what they saw in Team America World Police. Right? There's some Americans, there's a small group of Americans, and 143 Americans, the Center for Political Innovation, who don't want to kill you, who don't hate you, who actually admire how you supported and funded the Black Panthers, who actually admire all the solidarity you had with the Palestinians and the solidarity you now have with the people of Donbass, and there's one small group of Americans who respect you. And I feel like there's got to be somebody in the American government who says, you know what? Caleb and his people doing their thing, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. Maybe we don't need to, go after them. Maybe them going there and talking to the Kim Il-sung youth, maybe, just maybe, that could prevent nuclear war. Just throwing it out there. Maybe there's somebody in the American government who's sitting there, whoever the people are who monitor me, who keep their eye on evil RT reporter, maniacal Stalinist cult leader Caleb Maupin, who spreads propaganda and disinformation and encourages young people to question our great democratic system, right? There's got to be somebody in the American government who thinks that, who goes, wait a second, Americans can't visit North Korea anymore. Americans can't visit North Korea anymore. There's going to be one global youth gathering that only 15 Americans are going to. And at that global youth gathering, the Kim Il-sung, the official youth group of North Korea, is going to be there. And Caleb and his group, Center for Political Innovation, they're going to be there also. And they are going to show the North Koreans that even though we're a small organization, we think they're awesome, we respect them, and we do not support what our government has done against them. And maybe there's somebody in the American government who will sit there and go, okay, that should happen. Right? I mean, I don't know, right? Maybe they're so crazy and insane that'll put us in more danger of repression. I don't know. I don't know. But there you go. No, I am friends with people at a certain church in New York City that is from Korea. Not a member of the church, but I go and I'm friendly with them. And Carl, shout out to Carl the Trinket Man. He sent me 10 of these beautiful pins. And so on Carl's behalf, I gave them to people at the church, the Korean church in New York City. It's the North and South Korean flag together. And I gave it to 10 different people. And I took a picture. And 10 different people, we gave them out as CPI members. We gave out our Unified Korea pins. Right? So shout out to Carl. Carl can probably send them to you too. Beautiful, beautiful pins, the North Korean flag and the South Korean flag. And he sent me 10 of them in the mail, and I just gave them to people at the Korean church. And these people at the Korean church, they don't agree with me. They have very different views, but they also, their religion, they believe in a unified Korea. And so I showed up, and on behalf of CPI and on behalf of Carl the Trinket Man, I gave them these pins. And, I am not giving up on peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. But if the North Koreans at the World Youth Festival, if they just say, nope, we're not going to talk to you, I respect that, and there's nothing we can do about that. We did our best. We did our best to stand with a country that most so-called peace activists and so-called anti-imperialists in America are too cowardly and weak to stand with. And we did our best to show them that there's at least one group in America that will stand with them. The Communist Party has sold out North Korea, but we didn't, right? And so if we just made a noble try to establish dialogue with the Kim Il-sung youth, it's worth it. It's worth it. Those are my thoughts on the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. All right. Thoughts on Biden's pause on ING export terminals. I haven't been following that enough. I haven't been following that enough. I can't comment. I'll have to look into that and get back to you. I do apologize. I have been following the conflict in the Middle East. I've been following different things. I haven't been following that. I should be on top of that, right? That's natural gas and that's important. Take a rain check for now. All right. I feel like Trump would have gone along with the October 7th response. Yeah, I basically said that before, right? But again, for Trump to be in office, so many different things would have to change. I answered this before, butterfly effect, but yes, you're right. I mean, I don't disagree with you. During Reagan, some leftists had a slogan, impeach Bush first. Maybe we need impeach Kamala first. I like that. Maybe we can use that. I like that. Maybe we can use that. We're trying to figure out exactly how we can intervene around Kamala Harris. We have some ideas. I had a great phone call with Elizabeth, our president, today. I had a good phone call with Peter Coffin the other day. We're figuring it out. We have to stop Kamala, right, at all costs. And I have some ideas. Have you seen Tom Cotton's anti-Chinese interrogation? Yes. And it is anti-Asian racism is on the rise in America. And nobody wants to talk about it. Fucking PSL couldn't put end racism in their platform. They had to put end the war on Black America because they have abandoned the Asian community and they've targeted people like Douglas Kim and others. But anti-Asian racism is on the rise. And the anti-China hysteria, it's hatred for all Asians, right? That guy's from Singapore. Singapore is not China, but they still went after him and called him a Chinese agent, right? Racists, racists are going to utilize the anti-China rhetoric coming from our leaders to target all Asians, right? And that's just a fact, right? And anti-Asian racism is on the rise, and anti-China hysteria is part of that. And I mean, that whole thing was absolutely nuts. TikTok has nothing to do with the Chinese Communist Party at all. And they have bent over backwards to not have it be in any way connected, not have any mainline censorship, have anti-China stuff all over TikTok. I mean, it doesn't matter. They can't control TikTok the way they can control Twitter and Facebook. And so they have whipped up this stupid campaign against TikTok. Stupid. Right? The Chinese government is not reading your emails through you downloading TikTok. Okay, give me a break. All right. And it fits right in. I'm telling you, that's why I'm telling you, as much as I think Trump would be slightly better, I'm hearing a lot of bad things from the Trump camp right now. That is one of them. So there you go. All righty. So my last super chat, there's one last super chat from Sean Mod, right? And I will answer this. I explain it in, in many lectures I've given. I am not a Shia Muslim. I am a Christian. I'm a Protestant Christian, right? And I am absolutely a Protestant. I am not a Catholic and I am not Orthodox, right? My spirituality is based on the belief that you can have a spiritual connection with God. And I could never accept the Vatican. And with all due respect to my Russian friends, I could never accept the patriarch. I believe in a spiritual connection with God on your own. I believe in a light within. Okay. My spirituality is very much the spirituality of the English dissenters and the Quakers. But the reason that I wear an Akek ring, which is a Shia ring, and this is a Shia ring. It's from Yemen, actually. I had another one that was from Iran, but the reason I wear one of these is that when I was in Iran, all the guys were wearing them and I thought it looked very cool. And so when I got back from Iran, I did the research and I found out what they stood for. And I found it out. And then I reached out to a number of my Shia friends and I said, would it be okay if I wear one? And they said, yeah, people might think you're Shia, but yeah, you can wear one. So I started wearing them. I started wearing them because the story is that when the Prophet Muhammad reconquered the temple at Mecca, it was full of idols. And so his followers smashed all the idols and turned it into a temple to the one true God. And so the Prophet Muhammad wore on his finger a piece of one of the idols as a trophy of the victory over paganism. And that story touched me on an emotional level. And so that is why I wear an Islamic Akek ring, right? That's why I wear one. And so, and I talk about that. Go and watch. I did a faith and socialism workshop at a CPI event where I talk about that. And I talk about a lot of other things about Christianity and other things. So I'll put the link in. You can watch my faith and socialism workshop. You can learn a lot of different things. And one of them is why I, wear an Islamic Akek ring. Right. Here's the faith and socialism workshop. Now, I have a deep admiration for Shia Islam. I absolutely do. But I'm not one, right? I am a Christian, right? Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. He's the Son of God. But if you want to check out more about the Akek ring or more about my views on Christianity and stuff, watch that. Claudia is running for president and the Peace and Freedom Party, as is Cornel West. Any comment on that? Well, the California Peace and Freedom Party is always a clusterfuck, right? It's all the little tiny communist groups fighting with each other over who gets the nomination. And Workers' World used to fight for it, and PSL is very good at fighting for it. And I used to kind of keep up with it. I know Peace and Freedom was started. It was like Dr. Spock and some other people, and it was like running Black Panthers. Bob Avakian was actually one of the people who started the Peace and Freedom Party. He was one of their first leaders, and they were an electoral formation that ran like leftists and socialists for office. We are working. We will put out a critique of the Claudia and Karina campaign. We're going to do that. Okay. We don't want to focus on that kind of thing because it's demoralizing, right? PSL is this big socialist group that sucks, right? That leads people to be woke idiots. Okay. And that's not inspiring to dunk on this really big socialist group. And there's probably a lot of people who joined PSL. Look, I was in Workers' World for 8 years. PSL is a split from Workers' World, and I stayed in as bad as it got because I hoped the group could get better, right? Now those were different times. The polarization, this was like pre-Trump. It was like just as Trump was coming in, I got out of Workers' World. But so things were different. Things weren't as bad as they are now and as confused as they are now. But that said, we're going to write a critique. I mean, I've written a draft. I've shown it to a few people. We're going to have a solid critique of the campaign. We don't want to focus on that because that's a bummer. It's a bummer, right? It's a bummer, right? PSL sucks. Okay. PSL basically, they play the role that the Progressive Labor Party used to play. During the 1960s political upsurge, the Black Panthers were the main group that was fighting for freedom of Black people. And if you were a white activist, it was, do you support the Black Panthers or do you oppose them? And the Vietnamese National Liberation Front was fighting to free Vietnam from U.S. imperialism. And if you were a white anti-war activist, the question was, do you support the Vietnamese or don't you? Progressive Labor Party was this communist group that was everywhere. They were huge during the 1960s, and they were very in-your-face communist. Any college campus, no matter where you went in the late 60s, early 70s, there'd be people with red flags and big pictures of Mao and big pictures of Stalin, and they were the Progressive Labor Party, and they were everywhere. But they didn't support the Vietnamese. They said the Vietnamese were revisionists, and they didn't support the Vietnamese. They denounced the Vietnamese, and they hated the Black Panthers. They said the Black Panthers were black fascists and racial separatists, and they hated the Black Panthers. That's what PSL is. PSL is the big socialist group that's everywhere that is wrong on all the big issues. They're wrong on Russia. They're wrong on everything, practically, right? They're there to capture people that are looking for communism and take them in a woke direction, right? And their platform calls for de-electrifying America. They want to rip up the American power grid. It is horrifying. They want to immediately abandon all fossil fuel energies and replace them with windmills and solar panels. And they want to completely, change the food system to be sustainable, i.e., forget about ever having a steak again. You'll eat bugs and you'll like it. It is a degrowth program. And that is the main focus, right? Everything else is kind of secondary, right? And we can talk about the other issues, but the main exposure, they are against nuclear power. They are against fossil fuels, and they want to degrow the American economy. They want to basically shut down America's power grid, and it's in their platform. They want to shut down America's power grid, and then on top of that, they want a sustainable food system, which, translation, you'll go vegan and you will like it. They're degrowthers, right? And their campaign, they're recruiting to be Biden's counter gang. Right? They're not going to win. They're recruiting to be a counter gang for Joe Biden. And that's why The Guardian basically endorsed them, gave them an endorsement, an advertisement, right? And they're running on a platform of identity politics, and Trumpers are big fat racists. And that's what they're running on, right? I mean, and they suck. I mean, but, focusing on that, at the end of the day, it shouldn't really matter because what PSL is doing and what we're doing are complete opposites. We're not trying to recruit the same people, right? We kind of were for a while, right? When we started, CPI was recruiting internet communists. So is PSL. Well, we're past that. We've recruited a lot of great internet communists. Now we are moving lower and deeper to the real masses. That's what Vladimir Lenin said. We are figuring out how we can get PSL or get the CPI to recruit people who would never join a socialist group, never go looking for this. We are going lower and deeper to the real masses. We're getting out of the movement to the masses, and we are going out of the movement, lower and deeper to the real masses. That's what we're doing. So we won't encounter PSL because PSL, their whole thing is they want to run the movement. They want to take over the movement. They want to be king of the protest cage. Right now, everyone in New York City is really mad at them because there is like a protest. I think it was today or tomorrow at JFK Airport. And then PSL called a Palestine rally like the next day on Saturday to fuck with the protest the Muslim community called. Well, I'm telling you, as somebody who was in Workers' World for many years, that's what they do. They sit there in their offices, and it's all about who can maneuver to get the permits and who can fuck over the other person's rally. It's a stupid ego game. Brian Becker sits there and he's the king of the protest cage and he's got permits reserved for like 15 years in advance. It's stupid. It's a stupid ego game. Okay. So we just need to look right past them. They don't exist. And we're going lower and deeper to the real masses. The revolution will not be in the protest cage. Right? It's not going to be in the protest cage. We got to go lower and deeper to the real masses and just let PSL do their thing. We will publish a polemic because we got to train our members. We got to get our members to know why we're not PSL, right? And if somebody says, "Hey, I'm interested in socialism. Should I join the PSL?" We're going to have to very politely and in a way that doesn't make us look bad say, "Well, no, because they want to turn off your electricity." And that's in their platform. They want to turn off your electricity. They want to make sure you never eat a steak again. They don't think anti-Asian racism is a problem. They want to divide the struggle against the police state. They don't really oppose the attacks on civil liberties. They just oppose, they think there's just a war on black people, and they don't oppose anti-Asian racism, and they want to divide the people that are against the police state from the black community. Right. You have to, we're going to have to explain that PSL is playing a very negative role. Right. The fact that their platform doesn't talk about a police state, stop the opposing police state. It just says stop the war on Black America. That is a slap in the face to the Asian community that is facing so much racism. But the racism against them doesn't matter, according to PSL. Right? On top of that, they're not raising the alarm about Julian Assange, about Uhuru, about the fact they're coming for all of our rights. No, they're just making it about, black people are oppressed. America's an evil, racist country. Well, that's you get that from any woke college professor nowadays. So, they play a negative role and we're going to have to talk about it. But that's not our focus because at the end of the day, we're not competing with PSL. We don't want to recruit them. Right? PSL made a video for the anniversary of Lenin. And compare our podcast. We did a podcast, me, Jyoti Brar, Harpal Brar. We did a podcast on Lenin. Compare that to the PSL podcast on Lenin. They did not make a single fucking point in their entire podcast. It was like, Lenin, we still read him years later. And he helps us organize stuff. Oh my God. They didn't name a single book by Lenin in the entire thing. It was an hour and 20 minutes of no fucking content at all, right? And it was just, it was it was like the most cringe thing I have ever watched. It was an hour and 10 minutes of we organize stuff and we organize Palestine rallies, and our group sometimes we read Lenin together. Oh my God, it's amazing. And it was cringe. It was absolutely cringe. But Jyoti Brar, Harpal Brar, myself, we had a real conversation about Lenin. Compare the PSL podcast on Lenin to the Maupin and Brar podcast on Lenin, and it speaks for itself. And, so anyway, and that's why PSL is like progressive labor. Progressive labor in the 60s, the way they played up their, politics is they kept a dumbed down political atmosphere, right? It was just the workers and the bosses, and that's what PSL does. The way that they justify their opportunism is they are very anti-intellectual, right? They are very hostile to anyone who's actually studied Lenin, anyone who actually understands that stuff. And that's why they made a podcast with three people who don't know shit about Lenin and didn't say anything about Lenin, three rich kids who didn't say anything about Lenin in the entire broadcast. It was just, an hour and a half of we organize things and we're totally woke and we're not sexist and racist like these evil white men. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, Kinky is right. It's almost 1 a.m. I'll have to show the Kamala Harris video in another stream, maybe tomorrow night. Yeah. All right, folks. I'm going to put on the CPI video closing music, and I'll be back tomorrow. I think probably back tomorrow. So, yeah, there we go. Against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression.
While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.